And welcome back to Mixed Media. We are live for another awesome Tuesday this time, and will be for the foreseeable future, of the Mixed Media Podcast. I'm so happy to be here, especially because we have a special guest today, which is Scott Eggleston, who is down below me right there, and he'll introduce himself. He'll introduce himself once we get going. But first, I got to give a shout out to our Mixed Media fans out there. Thank you so much for tuning in. And also, especially our local supporters, which are, I'm going to mess this up probably, but Kai, Kairos, 909 Crime, Rob Sharma, and Post. There we go. I didn't mess it up. So thank you guys so much for your support.
You're missing one.
Oh, no. Alex Egbert. There we go. Yeah, Alex Egbert. Thank you so much for your support. And we've got some people in the chat already rolling in. We've got the Purpa, which I assume is one of Scott's people.
That's my daughter, yeah.
Oh, okay. Welcome. Thank you for tuning in. And if you're new to the show, which I assume there'll be some people new to the show today, which is exciting, this show is a live podcast, meaning what we can do is we can integrate your thoughts into our conversation, which is the fun part about doing this as a live show. So feel free to chat. We'll read almost every one of them, if not all of them, as we always do on every show. And also, we talk about art on this podcast, particularly media-related stuff. Tends to be mostly it. But we talk about art from our respective perspectives, filmmaking, gaming, music, and we like to talk about the cross-section of those things and pretty much everything about those things under the sun, whether it's history, news, pop culture, reviews, philosophy. I don't know. We've talked about like practically every aspect of our art form, so definitely check out our very long catalog of topics if you want to see the most random and unconcentrated list of topics ever created. So, yeah, check it out. Go ahead, Nathan.
We have lost Ben, by the way. I don't know how this happened.
Oh, no.
He's currently frozen on the screen because somehow he dropped out of Skype. He said he was having issues with that before the stream started, just for context. So, that's a little bit unfortunate. but
it froze on such an awesome shot of his face.
Perfect.
Yes. Well, I guess we'll skip over Ben when we introduce ourselves right now, but I'll get us started. So my name is Nathan Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur. I own a company called Ariella, based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania. And I guess Nathan.
Oh. Yeah, usually be Ben, but my name is Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
And our guest?
I'm Scott Eggleston. I'm a filmmaker and all-around goofy person, I guess.
Cool. And Scott, you might want to give people a little idea of who you are and why you're on the podcast. You've done so many things, so I wouldn't even know where to begin.
Well, I guess I'm on the podcast because I reached out to you, Irving, when I saw that you gave my movie a rating on Letterboxd, and considering that doesn't happen a whole lot, I wish it happened a little more. I try and reach out to people and say, hey, give me some feedback. What did you think of the movie? What worked for you? What didn't? Blah, blah, blah. And then you responded. Not everyone does. And you said, hey, I've been watching your YouTube channel since high school, right? You said.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how old you are now, but I guess you're probably in your mid-20s.
Yeah, you're right. Yep.
So I guess you'd been watching it for a while, and I still am on YouTube, but my activities dropped off quite a bit just because of life and other things, and it's hard to maintain a YouTube channel and pursue a feature film career, so I've been focusing mostly on that. I also have a day job and a family and a life, and so all those things sort of, vie for my time, and but I really always have loved movies. Grew up with movies like most people do, and grew up in a theater family, and then sort of migrated into filmmaking. And then because I'm sort of I'm a pretty tall person. I'm 6'7". It doesn't.
Oh wow!
Usually, typically have a lot of acting roles for people of that height, unless you're like playing monsters and such. So I think because of that, I kind of moved behind the camera and was a self-taught filmmaker, and then later I went to film school and started doing YouTube and stuff like that, and so that's sort of a really brief
Yeah, we'll save the depth of of how you came to be in our next segment there. But yeah, that's Scott, and we're glad to have him on the podcast. Actually, yeah, like you said, I've been watching his podcast for probably over 10 years now. Not his podcast, his YouTube channel, for probably over 10 years now. Telmore64 says, Scott has unmatched knowledge of the movie Aliens. Oh, that's...
Saw my coworker tuning in.
Okay, maybe we have to ask some questions about Aliens.
We quote that movie all the time. It's one of those movies, just...
Yeah. So I'm very happy to have you on here. It's kind of weird and surreal because I've been seeing you in non-live form, but now you respond. Like, I can talk and you talk back. So that's cool. So yeah, your YouTube channel, the Frugal Filmmaker. If anybody wants to go check it out, I highly recommend. I've made some of your stuff. Actually, so it wasn't just a theoretical thing for me. I've made particularly the most useful was the Frugal Dolly. I don't know if you remember that.
Was it this little skater? I mean, a little small one?
Yeah.
No. It's a table dolly. Yeah, those are handy.
Yeah, super useful when I had $0.
I remember a long time ago, I'm not a film person, so I don't know the term for this, but you rigged up this thing with PVC pipe for mounting a camera onto it and stabilizing it with your shoulder. Was that part of that? I don't know.
I never made a shoulder rig from PVC. Those were really popular for a while, and I never really used one of those. So I mean, I did make one that was more of a handheld, kind of based on a fig rig, like a two-handed rig, but it wasn't attached to your body in any way. But that's probably my most popular video, actually. Is that because it was really cheap to make, and it was the timing was right where everyone was sort of into building camera rigs out of PVC and stuff like that. Now it's almost, I mean, camera rigs are so cheap, you can buy them. That I kind of aged out of that, but that's a popular one. So
yeah, I know what Nathan's talking about. I can't remember if it was from you, Scott, or it was from Film Riot. So it might have been one of those two.
Well, every DIY filmmaking channel made one of those rigs, so it could be. Anyway,
yeah, for sure. So let's see. Any chats that I miss? The Perpa said can confirm about the aliens thing. I guess we should just go into how our weeks were.
Well, Ben has not introduced himself yet.
Yeah, Ben just came back in. Yes.
Hi. Can you making sure you can hear me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And you can see me?
Yes.
All good.
Okay. I don't know what's going on at the moment, so we'll see how long I before something else goes wrong. But yeah, I'm Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer.
Sweet. Let's hear. Yeah. So I guess we should talk about our weeks. So how were your weeks? Well, actually, we haven't had an episode.
It's been 3 weeks,
in
right? Or 2 weeks?
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Which is on the longer side. So how were your 3 weeks, people?
I mean, I can't quite remember what went on in those 3 weeks specifically. Something happened recently. Well, I posted about it on the Discord. I made another one of those CD poster things about to show the original one, but it's kind of like mounted on a wall in a way where like it'd be a pain to take it off and put it back on. But I made the new one, so I got this Polyphia CD. See that? And then got this little frame situation going on. If I kind of just apply force, because this one's a little bit tougher, but then you got a makeshift Apple Music type thing with CD in it. This one was a little bit more tricky than the other one because it's a jewel case, so it's actually hard, which means that there's not much tolerance that it allows for, right? Like the other CD case I had was like a soft cardboard type thing, so like it was able to like mold into the square shape, like fine, whatever. This one, when I took it off this time to show that, a piece of wood actually broke off in a way it's not noticeable. It's like only in the back of it, kind of splintered. So I'm not gonna do that again. But Yeah, that's what I've done, and probably the more eventful thing of the past 3 weeks. Yeah.
Cool. What else is going on?
Well, I can speak up. I had a short film that I completed probably 3 weeks ago, something like that.
Congrats.
That I made it for the specific purpose of getting into the local film festival, because even though I didn't have another feature done, my wife's always encouraged me, like, you should have you always have a presence at the local film festival. And so I said, that's a great idea. So I hadn't made a short film in a while. After making a feature film, making a short film was like a dream come true. It's just so much nicer, it's so much quicker and not as much money. But I got this film done, which I was proud of. It's called Awkward Love Scene. It's on my YouTube channel. It's a comedy. It's farce, basically, and I got to work with some actors. I like working with actors, and they got to have fun. Anyway, I made the short film, and of course, it got rejected by the local film festival. But that's okay. That's okay. It's still an enjoyable little movie.
Yeah.
But besides that, I live in Alaska, and winter's coming, so I've been trying to get my house ready to get dumped on, from all the snow that's about to hit us. So that's always exciting if you're a homeowner. Just prepping for inclement weather can always be exciting.
Yes, I'll have some questions about the Alaska thing when we get to our segment.
Okay.
I'm curious. Let's see. For me, I was in Dallas for a bit. I was in Dallas for 8 or 9 days for a super cool project. If you've been watching the podcast, I've talked about it every week. But basically, I did a 3D scan of Dealey Plaza for a nonprofit. So that was super fun. When I say super fun, I mean it was hours and hours in 100-degree weather. So it was pretty rough. And a lot of precautions had to be taken. But it happened, and it's finished. Got to experience Texas for the first time, which I'd never been to Texas, and was absolutely fascinated by every part of it. Definitely want to go back. Maybe I'll be going back soon, actually. And I'm happy to call it a success. So I'll be speaking at the national conference for, there's like maybe 4 or 5 national conferences happening around the same time about the JFK assassination, but I'll be talking at the one in Pittsburgh, so about the 3D scan. So, yeah, that's why we didn't have a show for 2. Well, that's why the last 2 didn't happen. It's because I was in Dallas. So there you go.
Nice. Wait, is it so? Can you do a virtual tour of Dealey Plaza now? Is that already ready and whatever?
So there's so basically the way it works is I got 2 data sets, one via what's called ground LiDAR. So it's just a camera on a tripod basically that has a little LiDAR spinny thing, and that goes into a software called Matterport, and in Matterport it generates the 3D tour via AI automatically. That is done, but it's only a partial data set because the second half of the data set was done via drones, and I took 500 gigabytes worth of drone photos for photogrammetry. So yeah, so basically yes and no. I can actually send you a link, Nathan, to a private version of it preview if you want to see it.
Sure.
But 400,000 square feet was no joke. So yeah, that's done. How about you, Ben?
Well, the most significant thing that's taken quite a bit of my time the past week was I had the fun experience of getting robbed in Baltimore City, and then trying to deal with the Baltimore City Police, which is not fun.
Yeah.
Okay. You went back to Baltimore.
Yes. Yeah.
What do you mean? You're held up at gunpoint, or?
It's kind of complicated. It's a story for another day, probably. But
okay.
Yeah. Well, at least I was able to recover everything, so that's good.
That's good.
But yeah.
Ben's in the club. Me and my wife actually got robbed in Baltimore at gunpoint.
Wow.
So that was fun. If you guys don't know out there, Ben and I went to college together, and my wife went to the same college as well. So, yeah, she's in the chat right now. She said, "That's never fun. Can confirm."
Yeah. So that took up a lot of my time the past week. So I don't know. Probably some other things went on, but nothing worth mentioning. So.
Okay, everyone's okay, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. The Purpa says, making a note not to visit Baltimore. Yeah, I can't say I would recommend it. I know Ben's that's like Ben's like not hometown, but home area. So I don't want to insult Ben.
I was born in Maryland. I mean, sorry, I was born in Baltimore. Technically,
oh, you were.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was born in Johns Hopkins Hospital.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely would not recommend.
There are some lovely parts of Baltimore, but it just you gotta be careful in some places, and sometimes those places that you have to be careful of shift slightly and unexpectedly. So,
yeah, I was in the second richest neighborhood in Baltimore when I got robbed at gunpoint. So,
Oh, man.
Yeah, not fun. Anyway, how about news? Any interesting news in our respective fields? Anything you guys have noticed?
I feel like there was something I wanted to say and then I forgot about news. So, well, skip me for now, I guess. I'll figure it out.
The writer's strike ended.
Oh yeah. I'm woefully ignorant on everything related to the writer's strike. So yeah, what are your thoughts on how it ended?
Well, I don't actually know all the details, but I know why they were striking, which was basically similar to why the actors are striking, and they're still on strike. But streaming rights are a big deal because a lot of these old contracts, didn't even talk about streaming. They're all, a lot of these old deals were where you could make money, after your show had ended and gone into syndication, you get residuals from that. But there was nothing about streaming, so these streaming services, were putting up all these shows that were getting billions of views, and the people that worked on them, except for maybe the producers who sold the properties to the streaming services or licensed them, they were the ones making the money, and nobody else was. In fact, there was a whole thing. I think it was on, I don't know if it was on Instagram or TikTok, where actors were posting their residual checks from big shows they worked on. I mean, name actors were posting their residual checks, and they were like $1, just ridiculously low. And so stuff like that was driving, these unions were, trying to support their members, and they went on strike, which of course caused a big, cease of production. In fact, probably like a lot of I think the biggest thing probably people noticed was like the talk shows, late night talk shows were suddenly stopped because the writers they didn't have any writers, they're all comedy based and they didn't have any writers, and so they ceased production. But they're all back now. They all came to an agreement. AI was another one, about using content generated by AI, whether it was written or the actors are, striking against, having their likeness used in AI generated media.
Yeah.
All that is pretty interesting from an entertainment perspective because, well, for like a micro indie like me, I mean, all that's really kind of compelling, the stuff you can do with AI. But usually that's I've used like ChatGPT to just like spitball like story ideas and things like that.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny because it really isn't that good at it. For all this talk about AI and everything, you try using it for something, actually legitimate, and it's like, well, this is all kind of repetitive and it doesn't not very original and stuff
Agreed.
like that. So, but actors, having their likeness used over and over and over and not getting credit or pay for it is a big deal. And there was a lot of stuff going. Anyway, I'm kind of getting off topic, but yeah, the writers came to an agreement. And so they have a contract for 3 years, I think, and see how that goes. But it's things. Productions obviously have picked up again, although there's no actors, so they have to work through that still.
Yeah. The purpose says tentative in talks, but no more picketing. As if it wasn't hard enough to be a creative for a living. Yeah, it is extremely hard. Definitely. Related to that, actually, that brings to mind, I noticed that there's an antitrust suit against Google. I mean, there's always these antitrust suits that crop up like every year or so. But this one has gone pretty far. And as you guys know, I love legal stuff because I'm weird. But I haven't actually read the suit yet. So when I do, I might do an episode on it. But this one is interesting in the sense that it has survived what's called a motion to dismiss a few times, some major ones, and this one has the potential to actually break up the company into different pieces. Whereas where Google might have to negotiate on how it's broken up, or it may not even have a choice in negotiating on how it's broken up. Antitrust law is extremely complicated and extremely arbitrary simultaneously. So we'll see how it goes. But this one is one of the more promising ones in a long time from the summaries that I saw. It'll impact entertainment, obviously, a ton if that were to happen. If YouTube, let's say, were to be forced to be broken off from Google, or Google couldn't sell movies anymore, or whatever it may be. So yeah, that's something I noticed, and I think that's it for me.
Okay, I did recall the thing. So two things actually. The Game Awards was announced for this year, and that'll be December 7th. Nominees are not known yet. The website's a little bit janky. If you go to it, it'll like have a button for nominees. You click on it and nothing happens. So I'm not sure what's up with that. But the nominees aren't even announced yet, so that makes sense. And aside from that, it was revealed that CD Projekt Red spent $130 million to develop Cyberpunk 2077, which I think might have been known already, but they spent $60 million to develop Phantom Liberty, which was a DLC for Cyberpunk 2077 that also came with some updates for the base game and stuff too. But the DLC was a little less than half of the cost of the original base game, and the base game was already quite expensive. So, yeah,
is that revolutionary? Like, not like that amount of spend into a DLC?
Well, video game developers have always been known for spending in ways that make no sense. So it's very possible that that's not, it's not like a record or anything like that, but it's certainly notable. I'd be surprised if there are many DLCs that were over $60 million. That is kind of crazy, especially because I feel like typically the DLC strategy with companies that have larger budget is like, let's not add that much actually, but still charge the same price type thing. So yeah, that's kind of wild. Yeah.
Cool. Did you say something or no?
No. I haven't really noticed anything particularly interesting, although I've been hearing a lot about people scoring horror films, because of course it's in horror TV shows, because it's that time of year. It seems like everything is being scored by this group called the Newton Brothers, which I've never heard of them. And apparently they're not actually related, but they both have the last name Newton. And that's what they do. They just do a bunch of like horror things that I've never heard of. But I guess now they're doing some like stuff on Disney Plus and on Netflix for like horror TV shows, so their names are kind of everywhere. So I guess that's interesting. It's not really a genre that I know anything about or pay any attention to at all. So yeah.
Cool.
I have to go back. Sorry, I just saw on a news article website that have like recommended articles or whatever, and one happened to be so related to what I just said, and it's kind of funny. So we're just talking about CD Projekt Red and frivolous spending, and they laid off 9% of their employees, which is about 100. So wow. That is and so the CD Projekt Red devs apparently are unionizing currently. So that is interesting and not good, but is the state of video game industry.
Yeah, that's not good. All right. I think that's it for news. So shall we go into our interview segment? Are we ready?
Yep, let's do it.
So if for those of you who are just tuning in right now, we are going to go into our interview segment first. Then we're going to go with arguing with Reddit, and then we're going to end the show talking about arcade games. 99 Crime says what?
Yeah, 99 Crime said 90%. No, 9%, not 90%.
Oh, I heard
90% would be. No. Sorry, 90. I don't know. Maybe I actually said that. I did not mean to say that. 90% would mean the studio's gone. I meant 9%.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, 90% would be. There's like a couple of employees in the office. That would not be enough.
Okay, well that's clarified. All right, let's go into our first segment. Here we go.
Mixed Media Movies.
Yes.
And and welcome back to Mixed Media. If you've been watching live, well, we're still here. But if you're listening to this in post where this is chopped up into segments, we just talked about our news segment. But today we've got Scott Eggleston, who is here to talk about Bad Bones, a feature film that was made in 2022. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
That's correct.
Yes, and he also is the creator for the YouTube channel Frugal Filmmaker, and I'm really excited to talk about him. As I said in the first segment, I've been watching his YouTube channel for probably over 10 years now, and have watched every one of his short films and his feature film. So
Well, thank you.
I'm very proud and happy and humbled to have Scott on the show right now, because he's been part of my filmmaking journey, and I don't know. That's crazy that he's here on the show right now talking to us. But Scott, if you want to reintroduce yourself just real quick for those who are just tuning in or listening in post.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for that intro. You said a lot of kind things. Thank you. That's very, very nice of you. I'm glad I was able to help you in some way. I mean, one reason I kind of started the channel was that I noticed that a lot of people had started like blogs and filmmaking stuff and then kind of would just disappear. And so I was just trying to, I didn't make a lot of money doing that, but it was kind of cool to try and give stuff back to help other people, just like I was helped. But as far as an intro, for me, I'm Scott Eggleston. I've been making movies. I don't know. I mean, the Frugal Filmmaker was actually a good excuse to make movies. If you want to make movies, I mean, start a YouTube channel because you're forced to, create content and unfortunately, it's interesting phenomena is that as you create, whatever kind of content you're going to create, if it's educational and teaches people things, those videos will be seen a lot more than the actual like creative videos that you make as far as like movies. Things like, I mean, all my most viewed videos are all about building camera rigs and stuff like that, versus, the films I would make. Although Bad Bones actually did a lot better, and I did release it on YouTube as well as other places like Tubi and Amazon, and I was actually shocked how well it did on YouTube because my other films never did that well on YouTube. I think that's because YouTube, the algorithm is like searching for long-form content.
Yeah.
And so the algorithm is like seeking that stuff out. And if it sees something new, it's like an hour and a half, it's gonna push it out there. I mean, that's, again, I'm just, speculating. But as a filmmaker, that's kind of a cool thing. If you can somehow get into that, and why did my film get 200,000 views and other films get 1 million? I mean, I don't know. It's kind of hard to figure out how that all works. All you can do is just make the best movie you can and try and market it the best you can so that the algorithm will see, oh, people are watching this, I'll send it to more people, kind of a thing. But I was kind of as I said earlier, I grew up in a theater family, so I was involved, in some form of, performance or entertainment at a pretty young age. And I sort of transitioned into movie making probably as a teenager, just because that I felt better behind the camera than I did in front of it. And so I was self-taught, and I sort of came into it. I mean, I'm not a young person, so I came into it sort of at the tail end of like the Super 8 filmmaking and the very beginning of video production. And when I went to college or junior college initially to study video production, I mean, this was all stuff that was like linear edit decks, it was VHS, and it was not affordable at all. I mean, if you wanted to make any kind of a production like that, or movie, short film, whatever, and you had to go to a film school and you had to use their equipment because there's no way to be able to afford it. I mean, most people wouldn't be able to. But then the digital revolution hit, and that's when, if you recall, Sony had their VX2000 camera, which was the first like digital. It was a mini DV camera that had a FireWire output, and you could dump it to the footage to a computer, edit it on a computer, and then dump it back to tape and show it that way. That was huge because it was like the first step where this equipment started becoming more affordable, because you could edit, on your home computer, and you wouldn't have to, go to school even to use their equipment or rent it, which I did that too. You could actually put something together that was of good quality, and you wouldn't lose a generation. That was a big deal too, because editing, linear edit deck, you'd lose a generation every time that you would make a dupe or a copy or an edit, and it looked like, you've probably seen old movies that were shot on VHS. They don't look super great. I mean, now it's almost like an aesthetic choice, right? You want it to look that way. Some people shoot that way. Like the VHS movies, for example, the horror series.
Yeah.
It's done that way on purpose. But as the cost came down for a lot of this stuff, and technology just kept advancing more and more, and pretty soon you weren't shooting on tape anymore. You were shooting on a memory card, and that was a big deal. And so I just sort of transitioned into DIY filmmaking because I was actually able to afford it. I could buy my own stuff, and if you've seen my channel, as Irving has, you probably noticed a lot of I did a lot of videos on cheap lighting and camera rigs, and even just the basics, panning and tilting and writing and stuff like that. Which is, I mean, there's an endless amount of material you can talk about as far as filmmaking goes. And I also, later, I end up going to film school as an undergrad and a graduate student, so I was able to study, in a more formal environment, which a lot of people say that's, a waste of money and whatever, but I really enjoyed it. In fact, and two people that I met in grad school actually helped me write Bad Bones, and then they also flew up here to Alaska to work on it. One of them was the director of photography. His name is Jared Beck, and then Eric White he was the gaffer, practical effects guy, kind of kitchen sink sort of position. And
we have questions about those.
Yeah, but because of those, one thing I will say about going to school and studying whatever art form it is that you develop relationships there that you'll have the rest of your life, and that's very true with me. And so even as I kind of, like I said before, as I've transitioned kind of away from YouTube because I just didn't have the time for it, because I wasn't able to pursue feature filmmaking and maintain a YouTube channel, which if anybody listening to this has done, or any sort of, like what you're doing with your podcast, I mean, it's a grind, right? You have to do something every week. You can't just take a break. And you're probably, I mean, I was a one-man operation, and you're probably a one-man operation, two-man operation. That takes a lot out. That takes a lot out of you, and a big commitment. You can't just, there's no PTO, right? For this kind of thing. But I keep coming back to movies, and I think that as I've sort of graduated into feature filmmaking, I can see that that's beneficial. You can do the most with a feature film than you can with a short film or even a YouTube channel. For most people, I mean, there's the 1% that can make a living off YouTube, but the rest of us, it's a different story. So, but I really enjoy it, and I like watching movies and going back to the classics and seeing things that people are doing today, which aren't necessarily big Hollywood movies. I really like these micro-budget movies. I'm really impressed with, a lot of things people can do with very little resources, and that's really cool. So
cool. Yeah. Before we continue, I just realized I forgot to allow my co-hosts to introduce themselves if they want to go ahead before we continue.
Hi, I'm Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer.
I'm Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
Yes. Okay, got that out of the way. So speaking of all that stuff, what was there like a point in your life in general where you, I guess, okay, so for me, I had no idea about anything film until like late high school, about the time where I subscribed to your channel. And it was Dark Knight that did it for me. And I immediately wanted to know how you make that film. How is it done behind the scenes? And then it was a whole enchanting world beyond that was so amazing to me. But was there a moment like that for you, or Was it something more gradual, or is it something where since you were a child you thought, I'm going to do this?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, I think back, you think back like what movies really inspired you. The original Star Wars, definitely. I saw that. I was, that was released in 1977. I saw it in the theater 5 times, and even though it was almost a fad at that point to see how many times did you see Star Wars, it was almost like a calling card. But I know director John Singleton. He claims that movie as well as being the movie that sent him off into the filmmaking path. And I'm not sure exactly when that happened, because I didn't really start making movies or even attempting that until I was probably like 19 or 20. And like I said, I was trying to, it was very difficult to make movies. So I actually, it was at the end of the Super 8 film kind of period. And so I bought up a bunch of equipment cheaply because everyone was trying to get rid of it. So I attempted to do some of that stuff, but that has its own set of challenges as well as expense, because it's film.
Yeah.
And you have to have it processed, and then you have to try and edit it physically with a splicer and everything. And I didn't really, I wasn't that successful doing that. But I did, like I said, I was able to actually attempt more of it in junior college. And but movies like, I'm a big science fiction fan. You probably noticed that from my movie as well. And so as a kid growing up in the 70s, I saw all those movies, Star Wars, Logan's Run, that crossed over into horror too. I mean, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and saw all the movies of that period, a lot of terrible ones too, the Omega Man, just all kinds of stuff that influenced me. And a lot of that stuff definitely shows up in my movie.
Cool.
Sort of that sort of period.
Yeah, so is there like a particular, because I know some people, they say, oh, this person's like a visual director, this one's an actor's director. Like, is there an aspect of filmmaking, that you are particularly drawn to? I know you mentioned acting earlier, but what do you like to think about?
Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of like flashy directors, right? Like you see a director like Brian De Palma or Denis Villeneuve, or these guys that have Robert Zemeckis have total command of the camera and do all this amazing camera moves, and But I think I'm more of a minimalist, and maybe that's just a limitation from money. But if you look at a director like John Carpenter, who he has really strong compositions. I mean, he has camera moves too, but he's not. I wouldn't call him flashy.
Yeah.
And I think that's more of what I'm like. I like actors a lot. I mean, I was an actor growing up, and so I try and write and give actors roles that they will thrive in and give them an environment they can thrive in, because they're the meat and potatoes of your movie. If you don't identify with those characters, it really doesn't matter what they're doing or what the story's about. It's going to fall flat. So I like working with actors. That's one thing I try to be better at, because when I'm so concerned about how much time we have to shoot typically. I mean, Bad Bones is a 10-day shoot.
Oh wow, that's insane.
It is.
It's actually incredible. Oh my gosh.
Really fast. So that's always in the back of my head, right? It's like, we have to get this done.
Yeah.
So I that's one thing I'm trying to work on, is to give myself more time, with the actors and their performance, or if something's not necessarily working with a performance, I'm more inclined to, give them a few takes and then move on, versus like stopping and saying, no, this isn't working, we need to change something. Because we'll always do that technically, right? We'll always say, oh, well, this lighting doesn't work, and it's we need to fix it, and blah blah blah. And I don't give the actors enough attention like that, like I should. Even though they may disagree with me, I try to cater to them, because I think they're so important, and I love them, and believe in what they're doing. Because it's really cool, when you write something and you have an actor read it, whether it's in an audition or on set. I mean, that is so fascinating to me. It's so cool, because they'll bring all kinds of things to your script that you never thought of, right? Or they'll give you suggestions to do things you never thought of. And they're supposed to, just like the rest of your people, right? Whether they're writing or sound or whatever. I mean, special effects, they can give you ideas that you never thought of, because you can't do it all. You can't, unless you're an animator voicing everything, you can't do everything. Filmmaking encompasses like every single art discipline there is.
Yeah.
And so you need to have a group of people around you that are better than you at a lot of this stuff. Unless you're like James Cameron, you're good at everything, and you're just bossy. I'm not him, so.
Yeah, that the 10 days thing is still in my head. That's insane. I remember Ben and I we did a short. Ben composed and I wrote and directed, and that was 4 days for a 15-minute short. And that was insane, right, Ben? That was crazy. So I can't imagine.
To be
I
fair,
can't even imagine.
that involved like dealing with a whole bunch of children.
That is true. There were a lot of children involved.
Like the entire cast was children.
Yeah, so that's fair.
That's exciting. Like herding cats.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. So we're gonna have to definitely ask questions about how this was done in 10 days. But before then, like, how did the concept come about? Was it something that you've been thinking about for a long while? Is it one of many features that you had in your head or were writing? Was it someone else's concept? Like, how did they come about?
No, it was my basic idea. You know, I'd worked on a couple feature films here in Alaska, a couple horror films, and I met an actor. His name is Chris Levine, who is the lead in Bad Bones, and we kind of hit it off. And he sort of challenged me, you know, to come up with a feature film idea or script that he could be in. And so I took him up on that. And so, but you know, I also reflected on, well, what do I have to work with? You know, what am I just going to write a script and try and, you know, do something completely from scratch, or am I going to try and use my resources that I have, which is also a common, you know, thing among, you know, low budget filmmakers, is you write around your resources that you can use in your movie so that it's not impossible. So you know you don't set anything in deep space, you know, the Earth's core, you know, but I had a house, and my house had an enormous crawl space in it. It's so big, it's not really even crawl space. I mean, I can stand up in it. Portions of it. So knowing that and being a, you know, kind of a closet fan of horror movies, I thought, you know, well, what kind of movie can I write that involves kind of a spooky house, you know, with a big crawl space, and maybe there's some, you know, weird things going on under the house. I'm a big fan of, you know, movies like Rear Window, Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window, which, you know, that movie, if you've seen it, is based, in my opinion, it's a relationship drama with like thriller trappings, right?
Yeah.
And so I wrote a film, again with the help of, you know, my friends from grad school, that was based around this relationship that kind of goes wrong, right? I mean, it's sort of a toxic love story in a way. But as far as like the mechanics of the story, those are clearly influenced by other movies that I've seen that I mentioned earlier. I mean, like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, there's some body horror elements in there, so a little Cronenberg maybe. Frankenstein, you know, stuff like that. So I don't so I took all these pieces, and I always try and do something that's a little, you know, a little different than maybe everything else, because if you're trying to compete with, you know, on a streaming service, for example, with 1,000 other movies or 10,000 other movies that are in your same genre, what are you going to do to stand out? You know, what are you going to do? So you have to do something a little bit different, because the setup for my movie is pretty tropey, right? It's like, a young couple in a creepy house, and there's, you know, supernatural shenanigans that go on. I mean, we've all seen those movies, especially in the micro budget world. So I try and, you know, do something that's a little unusual, borderline weird, maybe a little more ambivalent, or a little harder to pin down what's exactly going on. So it's a mystery, right?
Yeah.
So that the audience will hang around, you know, try and keep them hooked like that, as well as try and show them something maybe they haven't seen before.
Yeah.
So kind of mixing all those elements together, you know, what can you come up with as a writer, you know? And so that's what I had to work with, and then the movie you see is what the result was.
Cool. So a few chats here. We've got Gene and Roger Talk Movies says, love Bad Bones. When will we get a sequel?
Oh, man. I've had that question a lot, you know. But I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know if that'll happen. I kind of like leaving things a little open-ended.
Yeah.
But yeah, shout out to Gene and Roger. That's another podcast I'm on frequently. Actually, they do horror movies, and for the first time they invited me and one of my actors on that to talk about that movie, because they're local here to Alaska. So it's been fun to kind of dissect horror movies and realize, oh yeah, I'm influenced by that movie. Clearly.
Cool. Stephanie England, producer wife, says, "You just got a Super 8 camera and splicer, right?" Yeah, I think I showed it briefly. I don't know but got a Super 8 that I haven't used, sitting on my shelf here, from like an estate sale that I randomly found cool film stuff at. So,
for all of us not film people, what is the significance of a Super 8?
Oh boy.
Yeah, Irving.
Well, I mean, it's like the iconic camera of the 80s, basically, and shoots 8mm, which I don't have, which is very, very tiny by, well, actually that back then standards too, but it's very tiny. So it has a very particular look, very grainy, just because the film is so small. And influenced a lot of people into getting into film because it was accessible. So Scott is an example. There you go. So I always have one on me because, or I wanted to have one on me because it's such an important camera.
Yeah, it was aimed at the home movie market. People would shoot their home movies on a Super 8. Right. I mean, the difference between 8mm and Super 8 is that Super 8 actually uses more of the frame.
Yeah.
It's a larger frame than 8mm, but it's still the same width. In fact, if you see a lot of Super 8 movies, you can see like the sprocket holes.
Yeah.
In the image. However, one thing I learned about trying to shoot on Super 8 was if you're trying to do sound, this was one thing I just did not understand why they designed it like this. But like if you're shooting 18 frames per second, did you know like in a projector that plays sound is that the lens and the lamp is actually 18 frames ahead of the sound head.
Oh.
So you're seeing the image, and 18 frames behind it is the actual sound, where there's a mag stripe on the film. So can you imagine like trying to edit this? Because when you cut on picture, you're now chopping off the sound that goes with it. So the only way to really do that is to like completely remix your movie and dump the sound onto a print you've created with a mag stripe. I mean, it's just insane. That
sounds terrible.
Yeah. So I mean, the modern day solution is you shoot on Super 8 and then you have it like telescened or something over to digital, so that you can then edit it on a computer. That's how you would do it now, and get that same look that you're after. But it's it's wild. I mean,
yeah. There's a J.J. Abrams film actually called Super 8. I don't know if you've seen it, Scott.
I have. Yeah.
Okay, overrated, underrated?
I don't remember it all that well, so I'm gonna say it didn't stick. I think it was okay. I think it was all right.
Okay. Steph said, oh no, I read that already. Kai says, I also would have no clue that Bad Bones was a 10-day. Yeah, it's crazy. The Purpose says, most of the time I'd be concerned about someone spending that much time in a crawl space, but in this case, it is very cool.
Well, awesome. The good news was, like, originally, my first thought was, hey, we'll shoot the whole movie in the crawl space, because a lot of movies do that, a lot of micro-budget movies. I call them, like, trapped in a room movies.
Yeah.
We're all familiar with those. We've all seen them. The tricky part about a movie like that is, like, it gets boring fast. I mean, if you don't have a stellar script and story and actors or actor, if you're attempting like a single person, I mean, unless you're Ryan Reynolds buried in a coffin, I mean, with a really tight script, you're going to have a hard time with that, or a hard time keeping people around for it. So that's why so then I expanded it, like, I can use the whole house, I can use the attic, I can use the front yard, backyard, street, park, car, all this stuff. So don't limit yourself.
So I'm really into writing, by the way, and that's probably where I spend most of my time thinking in film, which is not how I started at all. I actually started in VFX, Video Copilot, like just binging Video Copilot and trying to do stuff from there. But from the writing perspective, like, how do you approach writing? Because there's 10,000 ways that people, they story circle, they plop everything on the page, and I always notice on online forums that people are always asking, how do I even start and what do I do? So what is your take?
That is a deep question. Well, obviously you have to have an idea, right? And I always like to, if I have an idea, I write it down. I have like a journal. I'll write my ideas in. And typically I'll like sleep on it, right? If I like it the next day, and it's like, oh, maybe this is worth pursuing because I don't think it's stupid, you know, because sometimes those ideas will just, they won't survive the night, you know. You'll come to your senses or whatever and realize it's not that great of an idea. But once I get past that, actually I kind of have a formula for like genre filmmaking. That's sort of based on a web series model, because I have made web series in the past. In fact, one of the first things I kind of did was a web series called Midnight, which is actually still on YouTube. It has a funny spelling. It's Midnyte, which is one reason you should never title your movie or whatever with a funny spelling, because you're going to have to say it every single time. It's bad marketing. But anyway, those were like 10-minute, like 7 to 10 minute episodes, and I had like 12 of them, I think. But one thing I kind of took from that was that if you're making a feature film, let's say you're making like an 80-minute feature, which is like what Bad Bones is, 83 minutes. I kind of came up with this formula, like you should have genre events happening like every 10 minutes in your story to keep people hooked. So at the very beginning, you should have something, and then 10 minutes in, you should have some kind of genre event. Like in Bad Bones, you've got a prologue with the two people, you know, who disappear, and then 10 minutes later, the main character is into the crawl space, and then 10 minutes later, I think like the apple explodes or something, and I don't know if that, but it's just that kind of momentum. You just keep building it with genre events, because those are the things, and in between you have, you know, character development, and you have your characters doing things, but those genre events are really important, in my opinion. Because those are also the things that will stick with people. Like, you know, a lot of people ask me, how'd you make that apple explode, you know? That's kind of a common question. It's those images stick in people's heads, and it's probably something I'm really proud of that moment in the movie, because number one, it's a well executed practical effect. Thank you, Eric White. And it's something that people remember, and it's something that you don't see very often, you know.
Excuse me.
The same thing with the practical effect at the end, where spoiler alert, the main something happens to the main character. As far as him how he disappears, and that effect, that practical effect, was like something I could not find anywhere on the internet. Like, no one had ever done that in a movie, I guess, because I couldn't find it anywhere. Usually it was like the reverse of that effect was like a zombie coming out of the ground, right? And we've seen that a lot, and there's lots of tutorials on how you would do that kind of effect, but I couldn't find the reverse. So we had a lot of long discussion, me and Eric and Jared, like how we would pull that off. And in fact, that was like the last shot in the movie, because we were talking about it while we were writing the movie, while we were shooting the movie, and then the very last day, that was one of the last things that we did, which I think it turned out okay. I'm not sure, you know, what you guys thought. But
no, like literally when we were doing our watch party, we were all like, "Whoa, what's going on?" Yeah, actually, I was gonna save this question for later, but I think people are probably sufficiently tantalized that I have to ask it now. How is it done? How is the apple exploded in that way?
So that effect was basically Eric took like a fake apple, obviously, and hollowed it out. I believe it was like some kind of styrofoam or something inside, and then he pressurized it with I think it was green hair conditioner. And so then as he pressurized it, you know, it's also, that fake apple is also glued to the street. So it wouldn't roll away like when it was pressurized. Because if you notice, like at the very end of that shot when it pops, it does kind of like break loose from the ground and sort of roll a little bit.
Okay.
But that's how we got the effect of it sort of starts bleeding, because it sort of bursts, it sort of, you know, breaks the membrane, sort of slowly breaks, and then the green ooze comes out of it, and then it squirts out because all the pressure is now released.
Yeah.
And then the second part of that shot is, you know, the apple dissolving, and that was basically not sped up footage of him pouring like an acetone onto a dissolved agent. It was done really fast, and it's like, as my main actor Chris Levine likes to point out, and the whole effect is sold by his reaction to that effect. So, which is true. All those elements, you know, working together have create a convincing, as well as the music, you know, and the shot and everything like that. So, for
sure, there were a few ews in the chat.
Everybody does kind of that, and then when, you know, what happens in the back of a car at one point.
Oh yes. Cool. Yeah, actually, one of my favorite feelings is watching something I've made in an audience. I've always have found it hard to describe the feelings that you sort of get as a director watching something, especially on a big screen that you've made with an audience. Like what, like I don't know. Can you put words on it? Like what does that feel like for people who haven't?
Well, it's very satisfying if they're reacting the way you hope they will. I mean, with Bad Bones, I did show it at a local film festival, and they were all pretty quiet. But when I've been in like smaller groups, like there was a lot of oohs, and that's gross. And it's not, my kids saw some of that stuff. They really flipped out and thought it was pretty disgusting. But I actually think it's pretty tame compared to what you typically see in a Hollywood film. But yeah, that's always exciting when people laugh at the right point or get scared or shriek or whatever. I mean, that's And sometimes
you can almost hear like the breaths that people are taking along with your film too, if you're like paying attention, like when they're like suck their breath in, and they're scared.
Yeah, and I'm not I mean, you probably noticed there's like no jump scares in this movie.
Yeah, that's true.
Because I don't really believe in jump scares because they release all the tension. So I would hope that the whole movie kind of ratchets up to just keeps adding and adding tension, which is way more uncomfortable, I think, for the audience. They're always expecting something to happen, versus a movie that's constantly giving you a jump scare, which I think is annoying. Personally, I hate that, especially when they're done poorly. If something just comes out of nowhere for no reason. I much prefer a shot, or a scare where there's something you sense something's in the background, or you think you see something. The actor's in the foreground, something is in the background, or maybe there's a pan to include something or a tilt. That's way more interesting to me versus, just a, I don't know, cheap scare,
Yeah, for sure. Kai says, yes, there were a lot of effectively gross things. He also says, I really liked how much you did with how little proper gore. Yeah, for sure. So then how about the location? Did that help you with the 10 days? Because you're obviously in Alaska. I assume you picked the right time of year, and was that helpful?
Summer.
Yeah.
Well, after working on 2 movies with Chris, we in Alaska during the winter.
Oh, gosh.
And if you're on the crew, you're there for every shot, right? So it was, oh man, some of those, the first shoot that we did was a movie which hasn't been released yet. Oh man, the title is escaping me now. But it was cold, and so I determined that when I shoot a movie here, it's not going to be in the winter; it's going to be in the summer. And the fact that it was in my house meant that I could also bring people in, and I could house them there because I had in one bedroom, I think we had five guys in there, and our actress had her own bedroom. But we had my 2 friends from the South. Flew up, and then Chris was from LA, and then there was my audio guy was local, but he lived like an hour away, and he's like, yeah, I'll just commute to the set. I'm like, no, don't commute to the set, let's just stay here. We're housing everybody else just about, except for some other people that, some other crew members and other actors that were local, but so that was nice, because then you don't have to worry about putting them up like in a hotel or an Airbnb or a trailer or whatever. There's no cost there. So that was huge, as well as the fact that if you're shooting mostly in that location, there's no company moves, right, to other locations. The only place we shot at that wasn't local to the house was the park, and that was about like a mile away for the scene in the park. So that's one reason we could get it done in 10 days, is because we weren't going anywhere, and so that really helped.
So in terms of you don't have to talk about specifics or anything like that, but in terms of the funding of the film, was that challenging? Was it the type of thing where you were calling in a lot of favors, or was it the type of thing where you had to dip into some finances? How did you end up funding it?
Well, the budget was about $10,000, so it was super low for a movie. If you've ever made a movie, that's not a lot of money. To make a movie. And what ended up happening was I had actually, when I was in grad school, I actually crowdfunded my thesis film for the same amount of money, actually, and that was like a 27-minute movie. That was Collection Day. You said you've seen all my movies. I don't know if you've seen that one or not, but that was also on my YouTube channel. But I didn't have a great experience crowdfunding just because it's so stressful. And if you use Kickstarter, it's all or nothing, right? Either make your goal or you don't get anything. Indiegogo is probably a less stressful way to go. But anyway, I didn't want to go that route. And so actually what had happened was, while we were writing the movie, I wasn't really sure how we were going to fund it or if it was even going to happen. I just wanted to write, a screenplay and have something ready. I had a friend who I'd been kind of working with on a little side business venture, and he said, "Hey, we want to do like an entertainment arm of this, company that we're establishing. Do you have any ideas for something we could do?" I said, "I've got it. I've got a movie." And so the company, which ended up being Blaster Media, which is what you see at the at the very beginning of the movie, that's basically me and two other guys, and we all pitched in like $3,300 to get the movie made. I am super leery about using like investors, just because as soon as you take someone's money, then you're accountable to them, and they're going to meddle. It's almost guaranteed. I've had that experience before, and I didn't like it. And so I would much rather work on a tiny film that I control versus a big film that I don't. So that probably means I'll never make a Hollywood movie. Who knows? If they come a-calling, maybe. But I'm not actively pursuing that because it's. And you hear about this kind of stuff all the time in Hollywood movies, right? Where the producers or the studios take the film away, or they tell you, you got to end your movie now. We're taking the money away. Change this in the script. Fire this actor. Hire this one. Whatever. Every filmmaker is a control freak to some degree. Every artist, and so it's much nicer to be able to control everything in your movie. And I should also point out that my wife is also very forgiving, allowing me to shoot in our house, and was supportive and was there for the shoot. That helps as well. Getting stuff like this done. If you're family, if you have a family, you're going to encroach on their lives. When you're making a movie, especially in the house they live in. Even though my kids, were out of state for the summer visiting family, so that worked out too. But yeah, it's definitely a spinning plates, kind of scenario where you got to have all the balls in the air. And but as far as the money goes, I was grateful that it was contained enough that we could self-fund basically. And the two guys that from Blaster Media that supported this project were also very hands-off. So they said, "We don't know anything about making movies. You do it." So great, that's perfect.
That's the best words you could possibly hear.
Yeah, and it's not a lot of money, right? So if the whole project tanks, you're not going to lose your house.
Right.
That's another thing I tried to work around as well.
That's probably the most encouraging thing. I would not have guessed $10,000 whatsoever. That's incredible. So that's one of the most encouraging things I've heard in a long time, because I've been feeling a little wow, I'm never gonna make a feature, but gotta keep the dream alive.
Well, surround yourself with talented people, even if you can't afford many of them. Get some really good ones and know what they're doing, and can wear several hats, because everybody will have to wear a bunch of hats. On a micro budget movie for sure. Cool.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Let me break this up by asking some questions from our audience members who posted questions on our Discord beforehand. By the way, if you want to join the Discord, there's a link in the description for those of you who are watching. The first one's a funny one from Alex Egbert. He says, and I quote, "Would Scott rather fight 100 duck-sized Michael Bays or one Michael Bay-sized duck?"
I'll go for the one. I think that's more doable.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, I think that makes more sense too.
Yeah. 100 ducks would be like piranhas, right? You wouldn't be able to really focus on any target.
Yeah,
one duck.
Oh man. And then Kai asks, can I say this? Is this a spoiler? Maybe I should. Okay, spoiler. Go check out the film. Link is in the description if you're going to be checking it out. to Bad Bones. But his question is, why did Jenna come back that one time when he was surprised? And I think I know exactly the moment. I don't know if you know the moment just from that, but...
Why did Jenna... Oh, you mean now Jenna, the neighbor? Because Jenna's...
Is that the wrong Jen? Is that the wrong Jen?
Jen is the wife, Jenna is the neighbor.
Oh, okay. No, I think he's talking about Jen. So he's asking, why does Jen come back? It's right after he decides to stop. I'm trying to use as little descriptive terms as possible.
Right.
It's the last time, I suppose.
Yeah, the last time. Yeah.
Right, when he kind of purges the house of her DNA. I'm assuming that's what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Why did she come back? Well, that's why he is shocked, right, when he sees her, because he had nothing to do with it. I'll just say that.
Okay.
Because something's at that point, something's taking on a life of its own, and he's lost control, which is sort of a common theme in mad scientist movies, right?
Yeah. I know we all thought that moment was really impressive, actually, when we have that... it's like a wandering push that the camera's doing into... I can't remember your actor's name. Is it Chris Levine? Did I remember that correctly? His that was a very good moment from him. I know we were all engrossed in that, and afterwards we were all going, wow, that was so crazy, and I really felt every moment of that, and I agree with that too. It's something about the way the camera wanders from sort of just completely oblique to his face, and then sort of more dead on, and then kind of wanders a little bit back and forth, that kind of constantly requires that you're on the edge of your seat, like, what is happening? It's a very good source of tension. So, yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, he's sort of in a stupor at that point, I think is what you're talking about. And I also like what the sound designer did with that scene, too. If you notice when the camera goes really close, like, everything that's being said by the mother-in-law sort of becomes garbly, and because he's thinking about one thing at that point.
Yes. Yeah, Kai says...
that moment worked.
Yeah, no, it worked well. Kai said Chris's reaction... Oh, yes, okay. So, yeah, he's confirming that we're correct. Let's see. And then we covered how the exploitative effects happen, so I think that's that's what everyone wanted to know. How did things explode? Well, actually, here's another question, though. The sort of new body sort of effect going on, how was that done?
You're talking about, like, when his duplicate pops?
Yes.
That was CGI. I mean, it's probably pretty obvious. There were several moments, that are clearly CGI. Because, well, it's funny because, like, the scene where Jen crosses the street and goes to the neighbor, and the neighbor opens the door, and there's something happening to her. That's a CGI. I mean, that was a moment I wrote in the script. I'm like, how are we even going to do this? This isn't going to look good. But because I thought at first, well, we'll just show Jenna's reaction, show her screaming, but we won't ever see what she sees. But then Eric, the gaffer and the practical effects guy, said, we'll just shoot it, and we'll hand it off to Tian. Tian was the visual effects guy, who wasn't there. Who another person I went to grad school with, and so we just sent it to him, and he did all the kind of melty effects, in the computer, which I thought worked pretty well.
Fantastic, yeah.
I think I think another secret with effects like that also is that you don't linger very long. You show a little bit of it, and then you cut away quickly, so that the audience just gets the impression of what's happening, but you don't leave it there long enough to see the seams of the shot, right? To see the seams. Which I think I did successfully most of the time. But as far as his body, actually he tried doing the popping stuff, like, with his body practically, and it just didn't work. So I was grateful, that I had somebody I could say, hey, I don't know what to do with this shot. Can you make it look good, and send it to him? And there's a lot of visual effects in this movie that you don't even realize are visual effects.
Yeah.
Which are always the best visual effects, right? When you don't know. I mean, a lot of them. The simple ones, like I did, as far as, like, hiding booms, or hiding lights, a lot of cropping in this movie. He's shooting 4K, and I know, Werner Herzog probably wouldn't be too impressed with me because he says, cropping is the tool of the week or something like that. But I did a lot. I was so grateful for the amount of stuff I could crop in this movie because I would like, for example, the scene where she is pumping his body full of bleach.
Mm-hmm.
I did not have enough shots for that. I was like, I don't have coverage for this. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I ended up duplicating a lot of the shots that I had and flipping them, cropping them, going tighter, just stuff like that. I was able to actually double the amount of shots that I had, so I could actually do a montage.
Okay.
Things like that. Those kind of visual effects you don't really appreciate because there's no way, I don't think anybody would ever guess that. That he's cheating. He's using these shots more than once, but you can go tighter, you can go looser, you can adjust what you see. And then more stuff out of it. But another thing, in that scene specifically, was he gets supposed to get jabbed with this needle, and there's no evidence that he was jabbed with a needle. Especially in the close-ups, you see blood forming, right? Which was also a visual effect. There was no blood there.
That looks. I thought that was a practical. Actually, that's how good it looks.
Well, okay, I'll give away one of my secrets here. For the extreme close-ups of the needle going into his body, he's actually a white T-shirt over the top of an apple. So it gets jabbed, and so you actually see there's apple juice that sort of grows on the white T-shirt, right? But I didn't want that. I wanted blood, so he changed it. The TN changed it to blood. And then when you see his body sinking, there needs to be a blood stain there, and there wasn't one, so he added it.
Okay.
Tracked it, with him sinking, and he actually even added a crease, where his shirt was folding, and the blood stain actually is creased as well. So I thought stuff like that was great. It just helps sell the whole thing, that it's consistent, it's happening at the same time.
For sure. I've noticed, and I don't know what to attribute it to, as you often don't know when you watch any director's work, but I noticed that your stuff has a very particular style of lighting, even in your shorts too. Is it because it's the same gaffer, or do you have heavy influence on your lighting setups? What I would describe it as is extremely naturalistic, in the sense that not that it's not shaped or whatever, but you tend to be okay with mixing color sources, but in a way that is there's a composition to it. So there'll be maybe a blue tinted light in the bottom left, and then maybe and that gives it sort of a natural space sort of feel, because that's how spaces are, mixed light. But is that because of your gaffer? Is that you? Where does that come from?
Well, it might have something to do with the fact that I've collaborated with those two guys quite a bit, like I said, in grad school also, and then with this movie. So I'm sure there's some consistency in the look. Obviously, before you start shooting anything, you talk to your cinematographer about how you want things to look. And I was more concerned about, I think the stuff above ground all kind of needed to look naturalistic, as you said. We used a lot of, natural lighting. I think we had one China ball, a paper lantern light that we used quite a bit. And one thing Jared, the cinematographer, requested was that I get curtains for my windows that were, opaque, or that were translucent, that basically they could act as diffusion for the sun.
Yeah.
So you could just close them and then use them that way. So the stuff, above ground is all kind of naturalistic like that. But I said, when you go into the crawl space, I want it to look like, German expressionism. I want it to be way more moody and more shadowy, more film noir.
Absolutely.
And which was also true with the color grade down there, that it was not supposed to be a normal space. It was supposed to be weird.
It's like jaundice yellow sort of palette. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I don't know if you noticed this or not. Is that as the movie progresses, as the character, as the wife kind of goes through her transformation, is that there's more of a green tint, and more greens tend to come in more as the movie progresses.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I noticed it, and I think I commented on it in the chat when we were watching it together. And I was like, am I imagining it, or am I noticing an actual color shift? So that's good to know that was there. Okay, gotcha.
Well, one thing that I was trying to imply was that, as these things are happening underground, well, what, I ask yourself, what is this entity underground? And what are its characteristics? And what happens to the characters that interact with it? For example, why is Jen all of a sudden drinking all this water?
Yeah.
And what was the purpose of that? What was the thing when he's looking, at his little list of like ancient elements? I don't know if you remember that when he's he's underground. He looks at something called azote. And if you remember this or not?
Yeah, I do.
On the close-up, and do you know what that is?
No, I don't.
It's what they used to call nitrogen.
Oh, okay.
So you've got water, you've got nitrogen, you've got earth.
Got it. No, I totally got it now. Okay, that adds a completely different dimension.
You've got green, that type of thing was all sort of... Again, when you're writing, you can work all these things in as well as visuals, that are all supposed to imply certain things. And again, I just want to blurt it out loud. This is what I meant,
Yeah.
But, I also tend to be, you probably notice, is I tend to understate a lot of things. It's more open-ended that way because I don't have the characters explaining things that we've seen.
Yeah.
So it's more challenging for the viewer that way. And some people don't like that. Some people want to be spoon-fed information, or they're frustrated by the lack of information. And this is a movie where I purposely withhold information.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
that you'll have to think about it. And again, that works for some people, doesn't for others, but that's my choice. So
cool.
One of the transformations that like occur throughout the movie is Jen's voice sort of like changes. And I was wondering how that happens, because the way it changes is not like in a way that makes it seem like like an actress could just easily just change her voice that way. I don't know how to explain it. It seemed almost like it could not have been intentional. But I don't know how was that how'd that happen?
Funny you bring that up, Nathan, because that was the result of our actress losing her voice halfway through the shoot.
Right. Yeah. I thought, I was like, man, I don't think you fake that that type of voice. Like, I think that just has to happen from something happening. Okay.
Yeah, when actually both of our lead actors, both Chris and Madison, who came from LA, they showed up and they immediately got sick, both of them. So she was fighting whatever it was. Could have been COVID. I don't know. We don't really know. But like halfway through, she came out of her bedroom and said, "I've lost my voice. I thought you should know." And so I said, "Oh, okay." So what we did was we pushed all of anything that we hadn't shot that was her speaking, we pushed it toward the end of the shoot, hoping that her voice would recover. It didn't. So we had to shoot certain scenes anyway. We cut some of her dialogue as a result. Like, I don't know if you noticed or not, but when she is across the street from Jenna, they have that shot of them kind of facing each other when they realize that they're both sort of imprisoned. Jenna has some dialogue, but Jen doesn't. She didn't say anything, because that was one of those things where we just said, well, we'll just cut her dialogue for this. But what we ended up doing is some scenes we had to shoot because we're toward the end that did have dialogue. You had to have the dialogue there, like her meeting with Jenna on the doorstep, for example. And then we just had to go back and do ADR. But because I worked that voice change into this story, I didn't have to ADR everything, which would have been a nightmare. So we just incorporated that, because you can tell when ADR is taking place, and I always cringe when I see ADR, especially in my own movies. It's a necessary evil much of the time, but I'm glad that you pointed that out, because it does play into the story. We could actually integrate it into the story without too much suspicion, why that happened, versus like in just maybe a movie with a regular story. It's like, why is her voice different, So.
Yeah. So the film that Ben and I did together, again, there were kids, and we had a lot of ADR to do, and one of our leads. I think we did ADR, what was it, like maybe 6 months after shooting or something?
Oh, no.
Probably more than that, probably 8 months.
Okay, so a good bit after shooting. Kid walks in, he had such a high, squeaky voice. Sup, Irving. It was first thing I heard, and I was like, oh no, I don't know what to do about this. We ended up just going with it. I think it worked well enough. I don't really know.
I think it's effective enough if you don't know what the intent was originally.
Yes, he was supposed to be like the sort of mousy, like sort of cowardly character, and that made it even funnier that he walked in with a deeper voice. So yeah, I don't like ADR at all. that experience kind of poisoned it for me. Cool. So I'll ask a question now that's sort of for me mostly. So it's a selfish question, but how do you know when you're ready to sort of go for that feature? You know, you've done maybe a few shorts. How do you know when you should do a feature, I guess?
Well, in my case, I told you Chris kind of pushed me to that point because I showed him a short film that I'd made, Invader, if you remember that one. That's basically built around a shootout, like a post-apocalyptic western. That's what that one was, and he thought it was decent enough that he might work with me on a feature film. But like he said, he told me, he said, I don't do shorts, so if you want to work together, we need to do a feature. And that was a good idea anyway, to kind of push me in that direction. Because I heard somebody say once, I can't remember where it was, on a blog or a podcast or something, where somebody said, the time comes where you need to stop making short films.
Yeah.
And I thought that's absolutely true. It's like you can make some great stuff in a short format, but there's no reason why you shouldn't be making feature films once you've, I'm not going to say mastered the short format, because obviously you can never do that. You could always improve. But it's just the next logical step, right? I mean, if you're honing your skills on a short film, you can move on to something bigger and better and more rewarding, and something that'll generate a lot more exposure. It's just, if that's what you want to do, if you want to make movies, features are the thing to do. So,
for sure, yeah, I've said on the podcast recently, short films are great, and they're a great tradition to sort of like step into to learn and everything, but they're not something people think about watching. They're just not, the average everyday person, and it's not a medium that's sort of alive, if that makes sense, in the common imagination. So, features always feel like the thing that you're chasing after.
Well, plus I would also argue that a lot of short form stuff has sort of evolved into like TikTok videos and things like that really don't tell stories. I mean, they're more set up like jokes, right? There's a setup and a payoff, and it's over.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, short films tend to have that format as well. But I think there's been I think those type of videos have sort of murked up the short film world, where features are still completely different, and it's their own thing.
Yeah.
So there's that as well. I mean, trying to compete, with TikTok and YouTube is quite daunting. Versus, I mean, it is in the feature film area space too, but I think I don't want to say easier. It's different. I don't know. It's definitely more satisfying when you can, something that's taken you, potentially years to make, that you're able to pull off. I mean, completing a feature film, even if it's terrible, I mean, is an incredible feat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's so many moving parts, versus, I mean, you can make a TikTok video on your phone in 2 minutes, and I'm not discounting the worth of those, because they obviously have their place as well. But managing and getting a feature film completed is just a big. It's just so hard. It's so hard to get
insane.
It done.
Yeah. Absolutely insane. Yeah, I had a teacher. I didn't go to film school, but I took some film classes in college, and I had a professor who said that films are mobile factories, and that's like the one of the most true things ever. You're just taking a ridiculous amount of logistics and resources, and you're concentrating them in one spot for a short period of time, and hopefully something good comes out of it. So yeah. So in terms of like publishing, then did you just say, okay, my strategy is, I've got a decent sized YouTube channel, I'll just drop it on there? Was there like a ramp up? I remember the trailer being published, but was there anything more into it, or did you just sort of put it out there?
Well, in a perfect world, the idea actually when I started the YouTube channel, and actually I showed an old, I mean, I made a video about why I released it on YouTube. I don't know if you've seen that one or not.
Yeah, I saw it.
And I show a clip in that video from like 10 years previous on my YouTube channel where I said, hey, YouTube could be, another way to release a film. The idea being that I would be consistently making videos up until that point, and so when it did hit, it would just take off.
Yeah.
Well, that didn't happen because I ran out of gas on YouTube. But that's not it's not a reason not to release your movie there. But as far as I think maybe you have more of a question about marketing, like how you get eyeballs on your movie, or what are the steps to get your movie on places maybe other than YouTube, such as Amazon or Tubi. And those are kind of two separate questions. Marketing wise, social media obviously is it's a free resource to get the word out. Everybody uses it. There's no reason why, even if you don't have any kind of social media presence, you probably have a Facebook page, you probably have, Instagram, maybe a TikTok or YouTube. You can just leverage all those platforms. I mean, obviously, if you've been doing things like a channel for 10 years, you're going to have a lot more people interested in what you're doing. Versus like me, where I disappear for 3 years and hey, I've got a movie. It's not as many people. Although, like I said, the algorithm got a hold of it and really helped me out, so that was positive. As far as getting on the other services like Amazon and Tubi, I went through FilmHub, which is a site you can upload your movie to. It's the easiest way to distribute your movie, but I don't know if it's the most lucrative. This was kind of an experiment because I didn't necessarily want to go through a traditional distributor. Mostly for fear of losing the rights to my movie.
Right.
There's all kinds of, there's a couple of really good forums on Facebook about this, or groups about Facebook, of notorious, distributors that will get you to sign your movie away for 25 years with all kinds of promises, and you never see a penny. And so I sort of went a safer route, although FilmHub is also fairly new. But they're more trustworthy. I mean, and you don't have to sign any paperwork. There's no lawyers involved. That's another thing about distributors is if you get a contract or somebody you negotiate or whatever with a distributor, or your lawyer negotiates or whatever with a distributor, then you have to pay a lawyer's fee, and you have to sign a contract, and which is all very important. I'm not saying that that's not necessary, but a site like FilmHub is very streamlined. You don't have to do any of that. You don't have to involve lawyers. They have a straightforward contract. It's like an 80-20 split. You'll get 80% of whatever your film makes. They get 20%, and they will get it on services that are unreachable, by everyday people like Tubi or Apple TV. I actually let them do Amazon as well, even though you can do that by yourself. Even though Amazon has kind of slammed the door in the face of indies lately, so you have to go through some kind of aggregator like FilmHub. And so that being said, I mean, the marketing doesn't change. They're not going to market your movie. You need to do that. A lot of filmmakers aren't interested in that. They just want, I've made my movie. It's been so much work, and I just want someone else to take over. Well, if you're going to do that, you need to hire a marketing person, or have someone else do it, because otherwise, and to be totally transparent, it's like I think my movie has probably made $7,000 from all these venues, which
that's fantastic.
But I'm not breaking even, right? I mean, I'm losing money. So
wait, did I hear it right? Did you say 7,000 or 70,000?
7.
Oh, okay. I misheard it entirely.
Yes. And that could be from a number of factors. It could be from, maybe FilmHub isn't the best because FilmHub depends on services licensing it from them. Like it's more of a passive type thing where you have to wait for people to come to FilmHub to license your film versus like a distributor, which would actively try and get your film on as many places as possible. So there's that. And FilmHub also isn't international, which is a bummer because I think there's lots of countries like India, obviously, that have a huge film, presence, make tons of movies, have all kinds of people that I don't know if they'd be interested in my specific movie, but that's a huge market. China, places like that. Where you would probably have to rely on an international distributor. And I had one that was interested in my movie, but I was a little afraid signing with them because I couldn't afford a lawyer to look over the contract, even though I had negotiated with them personally. So it kind of went into limbo.
Yeah.
So, and all that does is kind of make me think about, if I do make another movie, or when I make another movie, I should be, positive
Yes,
about
definitely.
that. Is that maybe I should be cutting my budget in half, so that I will come out ahead next time. Which is another challenge. Like, okay, I made this movie for $10,000. How do I make a movie for $5,000?
For 5,000, yeah, that's crazy.
Because I still have to pay everybody, right?
Yeah.
I mean, with a short film, that is one advantage I think of a short film is you can often get your friends to help you, or people that maybe want to work on the next big thing that you work on, so they're more forgiving. And because a short film doesn't take as long either. Like I shot Awkward Love Scene and Invader, they were all shot like in 2 days. They're 5-minute movies, so it's not that difficult.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you're doing feature, obviously there's a lot more to take into account. So, but and I think there's a lot more things to learn about at the marketing end. I find that kind of fascinating, actually. One thing I did is I created a web address that went directly to the Tubi link, and the web address was, this is purely for visual only. Like, for me to try to say it to you sounds stupid, but it's like Bad Bones with like a dot between the N and the ES.
Okay, yeah.
That's the web address, so that I can post that like on Instagram stories and everywhere, and it's really easy to type in, right? It's not like Bad Bones the movie is awesome.com, because you're going to lose people trying to type all that into a web browser. But Bad Bones, the short version, which looks exactly like the movie title.
Yeah.
And the .es just means that it's got a Spanish, it's just Spain. ES is Spain.
Yeah.
The URL. And then I was able to, using a site called Linkly, I was able to track that address, so I knew how many people were typing it in and where they were coming from. You get some interesting information. Like, for example, for some reason, like a couple of months ago, I had like 90 clicks from Hong Kong.
Oh.
For no apparent reason. Like, it's just a huge spike. Usually I get like 2 or 3 a day or something like that going right to that link, but that one, I think it was like a day, like one day. Somebody must have pulled it into some like class or something, or some sort of
yeah.
And they said, here, go to this site, go to this address and watch this movie and write a movie review or something, because it was just so random, and there's no way of tracking down obviously what exactly is happening, because I don't live in Hong Kong and there's no way to figure that out. But that's really interesting information for me, as far as like using web addresses like that are the exact title of the movie, but just use the the suffix at the end like .es in this case. If you're like making Star Wars, you'd see whatever the WRS was coming from, what country is that, and then buying that address.
Yeah.
And using it in marketing places like Instagram, where you can't use links anyway. Instagram stories you can, but Instagram posts, there's no way to post they won't let you post a link. So I'm always interested in DIY marketing, or guerrilla marketing, things you can do that will help promote your movie. I did another podcast, and I was talking about finding the hidden audience. Hollywood's, they have huge marketing budgets, so they have huge ad campaigns, TV and print and things like that. But how do we, as micro budget filmmakers, plug into that audience? How do we create something viral that will get out to everybody? It's always been something I've been interested in, because if you can crack that code, then it won't matter what your budget is. If you can draw people to your movie, obviously they have to stay and watch it, right? Because if they can tune out in 5 minutes too. Which YouTube has also got some of the best metrics you could ever want, as far as you can see that graph of like, people are you're losing them, and all my videos look like that. I think that's just probably most people's do.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But
cool.
Yeah,
that's very good advice, 100%. If we could just for the last 2 questions, come off the topic of Bad Bones, what's your opinion on how the film industry is going in general, in terms of cinema and streaming, and what do you think if someone is just coming out of film school right now, what does it look like, to become a filmmaker these days and interact with the film industry?
Wow. Well, there's no excuse not to make a movie. I mean, especially if you're coming out of film school, one thing that my professor told everybody when they graduated was that go make a movie. I mean, especially with all these people you've developed relationships with, and they can do every job, whatever it is. And you don't. I mean, I'm living proof that you don't need a ton of money. I mean, obviously, $10,000 isn't pocket change,
Yeah.
But it's not an impossible amount, and you can always make something for less than that. I mean, have you guys seen Skinamarink? Have you seen that movie?
No.
You even heard of that?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, it's on Hulu right now, and it's an experimental horror film that was also shot in the filmmaker's childhood home. But it actually, what happened with that movie was that it got leaked. It was in several film festivals, and it got leaked. And I don't know if that was intentional leaking or not, but it ended up in bits and pieces on TikTok. And so a lot of hype built around this movie, and it actually got a theatrical release. But you watch this movie, and you're like, this movie's made for nothing. I mean, which isn't true either. The budget was similar to my budget. This thing was like 15,000 Canadian, which is about 11,000 US.
Yeah, it's still impressive though.
Yeah, and it's not for everybody because it's experimental. If you don't know it's experimental going in, you're going to say, "What is this?" What am I watching? They don't even show the actors' faces. I mean, that's the kind of movie it is. But the micro budget world, and granted, there's a million micro budget movies, which is a thing you should also be aware of, is that you're vying for attention from people whose attention is diluted in 1,000 different ways, let alone streaming, right? I mean, because you have to deal with, you're competing with YouTube, you're competing with video games, you're competing with social media, you're competing with, phone apps, all this stuff, that is going to try and vie for people's attention. So that's why I'm a big believer in, making something that people can't ignore, or that at least make something with some elements that are unique or different, because number one, you can't compete with Hollywood, right? This is impossible.
Yeah.
And there's really no reason why a total stranger is going to rent my movie on Amazon, even though it's only $2, versus a Hollywood film, because they could spend $2 and watch something that costs $100 million to make.
Yeah.
And that's probably way better than my movie. So the challenge is to again make something that Hollywood won't touch. Skinamarink is a good example of that, because it is experimental, it is weird, and it's not conventional. And whether it's a good movie or not is up to you. I think it's a good nightmare fuel movie, but it's different. And I like weird movies, so that's okay. But obviously, it's like anything else. It's like any other art form. Everybody's going to say you can't do it, or it's too hard, and it is harder than writing a book, right? I mean, making a movie is, because you have to do that too. You have to write a screenplay, and you have to get people. You have to find actors, and you have to find money, and you have to find someone to shoot it, or you can shoot it, and you can edit it, and you can direct it and write it. I mean, that's kind of what I did. But you also need to, develop a certain level of skill if you're going to attempt something like that. However, you can also argue, well, who cares? Just go grab a camera and shoot a movie. I mean, that's one thing you hear a lot also.
Yeah.
I guess going back to what I said previously, it's like there's no reason not to do it. And granted, your first project isn't going to be that good, because if you don't know what you're doing, you learn from experience and you keep doing it until you get better. But
sure.
Sorry to cut you off. I was gonna say there's a lot of parallels with video game development, and starting off as a small developer compared to a big studio on that. Yeah,
I think the thing that we have on our side that big studios don't is that they are bound by convention, and we are not. They have to follow certain conventions, otherwise their movie isn't marketable. And granted, you should have marketable elements too, but you don't have to necessarily. You're not as strictly bound as they are, because you don't have a studio breathing down your neck.
Yeah, for sure.
You're not beholden to anybody except yourself. If you can, you are beholden to maybe, Uncle Steve, who gives you the money, maybe. But if you can avoid that, and just be able to control everything, then you're golden. I mean, it's just, granted, not everyone's going to like your stuff. I always think it's fascinating, no matter what the art form is. It's like some people might love it, and other people will hate it. And it's the exact same thing, right? The music or the video game or the movie or the TV show doesn't change. Yeah. It's the same for everybody, but how they receive it is different. I always thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Chris Levine is in the chat. Shout out to you, Chris. You did a fantastic job. He says, what would you change the next time around, Scotty? Cast differently?
Well, I mentioned, maybe trying to attempt something on a lower budget. I will admit it is nice, like having two actors from LA, and Chris helped me with casting quite a bit. We had a whole casting process that we went through, we collaborated on. He was amazing in that. And in fact, we cast somebody initially who ended up backing out of the female lead. And so Chris was like, what do you want to do? He kind of threw the ball at me and said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, because everybody that we had auditioned previously or done tests with previously now had commitments, everybody that was second, third choices. And so I said, we'll just start over, we'll just go through the same process again. And fortunately, we had enough time where we could find someone. We found Madison, who I thought did a great job. So we were fortunate in that area. But as far as, what would I do differently next time? I guess it kind of depends on if I had the same budget or more, or if I had less money. As far as what I would do differently with this specific movie, because I know Chris has asked me this question before, what would you change, or if you could do something different? And as I've watched it more than once, obviously there's certain things I wish we would have been able to shoot and use in the movie that were actually in the script, but in my haste to get everything done, sometimes, because when you're making a movie, sometimes you're cutting things that you don't think are necessary, but they were necessary when you were writing them. And I think in the the rush to kind of get everything done and make sure that we got done on schedule and on budget and everything, there were certain extra things that I should have shot and put in the movie, or again, as I mentioned before, taking more time on with performance. There's maybe you noticed, for example, when the Russ character dies, it's pretty abrupt.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was, I knew when we were writing this movie, I knew this is a critical moment in the movie, right? Because he's been the protagonist. We've been following him through the whole movie. He's the one that's driving the story. His actions dictate what happens. And then he dies. And I wish I would have taken better care of that scene. Because that character deserved, I think, a little better death than what I gave him.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not saying it derails the whole movie, but I think as your reaction, they're like, oh yeah, that was kind of oh, that happened, and moments like that, where I should have bound people to the story better. You kind of drop out of the movie for a minute to kind of soak it in, right? So things like that. But again, those are just things that you learn from. I think part of the reason that happened was that whole scene of how that transpires, the way we wrote it didn't work, because you're dealing with two actors who aren't stunt people, and you're asking them to do things that are kind of stunt related, which isn't really fair to them and not necessarily safe either. Because I think in the original script, she pushes him across the room or something, and he falls and hits his head on the fireplace or something like that. Which on the page it sounds awesome, but then when you get into the actual practice, it's
how do I do this safely?
And I don't want to endanger my actor. Something I'm very conscious of, because when you're writing things, sometimes even a simple fall in a story isn't safe.
Yeah.
And you don't, especially in a very small budgeted movie, you don't want to hurt anybody, because number one, they won't ever work for you again, and word will get out that you run an unsafe set.
Yeah.
And so one thing I pride myself on is a set that's very friendly and everyone's having a good time and it's fun and enjoyable. In fact, Chris, one thing he said was that that was the most chill set he's ever been on, which I took as a compliment.
In 10 days to shoot a feature and it's the most chill set, that is an accomplishment. Yeah.
So I appreciated that. But
That's good. That's good. Yeah, Chris says that death wasn't in my contract. Oh man. Okay, last question. and this is a question we always ask for our interviews. What is your biggest hot take? So anything that's might be the most controversial opinion you have on film. Any odd opinion you have on a movie or anything at all.
Well, I think I'm burnt out on superhero movies.
Oh, well, that's excuse me. That's me too, for sure.
Hollywood is definitely moving, toward more tent poles and less independence, which I think is a little sad. If you look at the 1970s, for example, there were a lot of amazing movies made in the 70s that, part of that was because the studios they took a lot of the film school brats and kind of let them do whatever they wanted, like the Francis Ford Coppolas, the George Lucases, Brian De Palmas, Scorsese's, all those guys who cut their teeth either in film school or, like in Scorsese's case, it was working for Roger Corman, making exploitation stuff. And it's unfortunate that, like I said, Hollywood is kind of pouring all their money into these huge movies when they could take like the budget of one of these movies and make 50 incredible independent films, giving more work to filmmakers, actors, all that stuff. So that's why I kind of look at what's being done in the micro budget world, and that's really exciting because people are doing number one, they're not letting anything stop them from making their movie. And granted, you can always argue, well, if you had more money, people told me about this too. It's like, if you have more money, you could make a more awesome film. You just need to wait until you get the money, and I really don't like waiting. I don't want to spend 5 years on one movie,
Yeah.
But what people are doing, and you can find a lot of interesting, cool, super low budget movies on Tubi, on YouTube, even Amazon. You just have to look for them. They're harder to find, obviously, because they don't have the the marketing reach that a Hollywood film does. But and I'm not saying Hollywood is just making all movies that are not entertaining or not worth it, because obviously they are. There's been some, and they're making even movies that I like. Kind of like weird sci-fi horror movies. Tend to come out. I think the last one I really liked was Alex Garland's Annihilation. I really like that one.
Okay.
And granted, that was like 5 years ago. But that's the kind of movie I really like. Is where they take really interesting, kind of heady, almost like sci-fi concepts, and there's some action in there, and there's some horror in there, and it's mysterious, and you don't completely know what's going on until maybe the end, and which I hope is kind of what my movie was like. That's kind of what I strive for. So, but hopefully, and things could always change too. There's as the streaming space, gets more and more prevalent. Obviously, with COVID kind of disrupting the theatrical exhibition, we might see, who knows, money being maybe funneled off into some of these smaller films that have potential, and there have obviously been these weird little movies that have been incredibly successful, right? Like Paranormal Activity and the Blair Witch Project, that have been like genre creating films that were not Hollywood films and not movies Hollywood would ever make.
Yeah.
So that's encouraging.
For sure. Well, on that note, that is our wonderful interview. Congrats again on a great film, a great accomplishment. I think the part that blows my mind, absolutely, 10 days, $10,000. That makes me look at the film entirely different. That's an incredible accomplishment, and and on 220,000 views on the film, congrats on all that stuff, and we're happy to have you on. And I think people who are coming up, hearing other people's stories is extremely, extremely useful. And hearing how other people operate and do things and are able to, overcome challenges is extremely useful. So if you found that useful, definitely let us know, so that I can relay it to Scott and make Scott happy. And thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting because I'm not even in the same industry, but a lot of the stuff really sort of applies, especially having to do with being a small studio on a budget, type of stuff. That's gonna apply regardless.
For sure. Yeah. Sweet. Well, that's our first segment of the day. went a little bit long, so we might have to speed run a little bit of arguing with Reddit, which is always
Sorry.
fun anyway. That's okay. That's okay. It was chock full of good stuff. But yeah, now we'll. If you're new to the show, we'll go on to our arguing with Reddit segment, which Ben will explain in a moment, and then after that, we'll finish off with talking about arcade games. And Scott, are you still game to hang around, or are you tired?
Yeah, sure. I was a gamer.
Okay, gotcha. Sounds good. All right, let's see here. Here we go.
Mixed media music.
All right, welcome to Mixed Media Music, a portion of Mixed Media Podcast dedicated to all things music, with a special emphasis on media music and on classical music. My name is Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer, and I am the main host for Mixed Media Music, and I am joined by my two co-hosts and by a special guest today, so I'll let them introduce themselves.
So my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania. I own a company called Ariella.
I'm Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
And I'm Scott Eggleston, a filmmaker out of Alaska.
All right, yeah, well, welcome to our show if you're watching live, and welcome if you are listening to us, and thank you again to Scott for joining us. If you are not watching live or listening live, Scott, we just had a fantastic interview. Irving did a fantastic interview with him about his filmmaking process as well as some of his recent projects, and you should definitely check that segment out. So tonight on Mixed Media Music, we have our Arguing with Reddit segment, and if you aren't familiar with that, basically, my co-hosts have found some hot takes or controversial statements or questions or things like that from the internet, mostly from Reddit, and I haven't seen these things, and they present them to me, and you get my live response to them, and I picked one for myself that I do know, although I'm not sure I remember exactly what it was, so we'll see how that goes. Yeah, and of course related to music broadly. So that is our Arguing with Reddit segment. So why don't we get started?
Okay, so I just realized the complication of having a fourth person on the podcast and doing Arguing with Reddit means that my template doesn't work quite right. So what I'm going to do instead is, let's see, is this going to work?
You can kick me out. You need the space.
No, let's see. Oh no, okay, that covers Scott entirely. So let's I guess I'll read it and also simultaneously put the link in the chat. Does that work?
Sounds good.
Okay. So this is the first one, and I'll do the one from you, Ben.
Okay. I think this was roughly like, what special skills do I need? I mean, I'll pull up exactly, see what read it exactly because it's pretty short. But if I recall, it was something like, what talent or special talent do I need to compose? That might not be exactly what it was. It's let's see. This person asks, do I need innate talent to create music, and how do I know that I have it? And yeah, okay. So that's basically it's kind of a question. Now, a lot of good responses on here too, but I figured I would just add my words to this. Do you need any special talent to write music? No. I mean, I guess if you consider like persistence talent, then sure. Like, patience probably is also important, but I'm not sure if it's necessarily like particular talents. Now, I mean, I guess you probably want to like have the ability to hear things and not be tone deaf. But other than that, yeah, if you can hear and like a lot of people describe themselves as being tone deaf. That is not true. It's a very, very rare condition where you can't tell the difference in pitches. Everything's just one pitch. It is very rare. A lot of people who claim they have that problem, they just have not trained themselves in some critical listening skills and matching skills. Right, like can you match a pitch? But they literally, most people, almost nobody hears everything as the same pitch, which is being purely tone deaf. So you are most likely not tone deaf, even if you think you are. This means you have to work a little bit harder, at some of like the foundations of music listening first, and like, can I tell whether one pitch is higher than next, and like, can I kind of match that with my voice? Okay, so yeah, you might be like, that might come a little bit easier to you, or like a sense of rhythm might come a little bit more easily to you. But these are all things that one can overcome by practice and by persistence. Yeah, and like I don't know, I can't really point to any particular skill that any like great composers have that others don't, except for, like I said, kind of being persistent, being intellectually curious, and those sorts of things, right? Now, if you're not going to put in the work, you're probably never going to like achieve a lot. But it also depends on what you want to achieve. So yeah, I don't think those are special talents. And how do you know that you have these skills? Well, like I said, there really aren't any. The test for whether you're tone deaf or not is if someone plays two different notes, do they sound like they're the same pitch to you? Assuming that the person doesn't play the same pitch twice. So other than that, yeah, I don't know. Just go out and write music. Like, and you can, I guess you can kind of tell, right, if there are some basic things that you need to work on. Like, if you don't know how to read music, well, you know that, and go and work on it. Yeah, that's kind of my response to that. Really, just do it.
Yeah, I think people sell themselves short on how much they can go from absolute ignorance about anything in an art form to relatively, at the very least, like, obviously getting to expert level is going to be extremely difficult on anything. But, like, in terms of, like, getting to the level where you have a more rounded intuition on what you're looking at, watching, listening to, or whatever the heck it is.
Yeah. No, I mean, music, I think it's a little bit different for some different kinds of arts, right? Where, like, there are some things that one can do without much training. Some people, like, for instance, I think you may not necessarily have to have studied, like, painting or drawing. Some people just have, like, a pretty, decent natural ability to, like, draw naturalistically without having studied it. Now, of course, they need study and training to refine that to make it really good. But that, I think, like, even without having studied that, a lot of people can kind of, be creative and, like, creating something like drawing or painting something, right? It's a little bit, like, the barrier in music is maybe a little bit higher, because, you also have to figure out, like, how to produce sound. Like, you can't just be, like, totally creative and, like, well, I had some pots and pans around the house and, like, do some, but people generally don't do that sort of thing. And in that sense, like, music, I think, probably takes a little bit more learning in some, I don't think it's necessary, but the way that people tend to approach it probably takes a little bit more learning than, like, some other, you could just, like dancing too, right? You might not know how to do some specific ballet moves, but a lot of people, you can just kind of express yourself in movement, right? And it's a little bit harder. I think it doesn't come as naturally to everyone, or really almost anybody, to, like, how do you express yourself in music? So there is that, but you just have to do it.
Yeah. Question that came to mind just now for Scott, because this this has become a little bit of a trope on our show. What's the overrated or underrated on Hans Zimmer?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
As a composer? Hans Zimmer, is that Christopher Nolan's composer?
Yeah, for at least the vast majority of his films, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty, I think it's great. As far as music composition goes, it seems like, people like Hans Zimmer and John Williams and Alan Silvestri, I think those type of composers seem to be, like, fading away, where you have, like, distinctive themes in music versus kind of generic music. I don't know if you've noticed that Ben, or not? Like with Marvel movies, I mean, can you even come up with a Marvel theme in your head versus like the Star Wars theme or something from Interstellar? I mean,
Yeah, there is an Avengers theme.
what is it?
Now, I honestly can't. I'm trying to remember if I even know what it sounds like. That is Alan Silvestri, actually. He wrote that.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, but also I don't really pay attention to superhero movies, so I'm not the right person to ask. But
well, I can answer it. There are no discernible themes in any of them.
there is an Avengers theme, and it does show up like in "We're the Avengers" kinds of moments, but it's not the kind of theme that it's. I feel like it works more on a subconscious level. Like you probably recognize that the theme is there, but you don't recognize that it's there.
It's competent. It's competent music, but it doesn't stick. It doesn't. I mean, it serves its purpose, I guess, creating the mood at the time, but it doesn't resonate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I agree that strongly thematic things that are defined almost by their musical themes, is pretty rare. The last good example that I can think of is How to Train Your Dragon.
Okay.
But I don't know that is really it's not at the same cultural level as like Star Wars sort of thing. But I think well, I love the How to Train Your Dragon films. And so to me, like that's a really great example of being very thematic, driven by themes, and the themes are like a quintessential part of that film, of those three films.
Yeah. The next one will come from Nathan. Nathan, if you want to explain.
Sure. Sure. Let me bring it up. Okay. This is from r/composer talk, and my voice has just died randomly. But what melody inspires you? What melody amazes you? Please share and say why. There's a more description to it, but that's essentially the thing. And the funny part is that in the description it says, I do a podcast in which a guest composer and I discuss a melody that inspires and amazes them. So we're kind of mirroring what's going on there. But,
there we go. Yeah. Well, hey, if you need someone to talk to, I'm around, I guess. Yeah. One melody. I mean, that's hard. I can give you a ton of melodies that are important to me. I don't know. Let's just throw out some. I would say, it might be somewhat controversial. I think the most natural melody writer is probably Alexander Borodin. Now, I say that in part because he wrote like 14 pieces, and his primary job was being a chemistry professor, and I think he's related. I think his daughter married, oh gosh, what's the guy's name? The guy who invented the periodic table. So he was a significant chemist in 19th century Russia.
Wait, is it Bohr?
Isn't like Mandel? So starts with an M, I think.
Okay, I don't know.
It's been a long time since I took high school chemistry. Oh yeah, Alexander Borodin. His primary occupation was being a chemist and a chemistry professor, and he just wrote music, kind of in his spare time. Sometimes he'd be like, I think just one story where he said something like, oh, I can't come into work. I spilled some like chemical on my finger and burned myself, and like he just used it as an excuse to stay home and write music. So he wrote like somewhere between like 14 and 21 pieces, and most of them, well, like some of really large scale. Like he didn't quite finish his opera Prince Igor, but massive work. Some smaller things. Honestly, every piece of his has an incredible melody, and if it's a multi-movement work, it probably has like 4 to 10 amazing melodies in it. Now you have to kind of like his Russian kind of 19th century stylized style of melodic writing. But I think just in terms of like incredible melody ratio of like incredible melodies to amount of musical output, there's not a single one of his pieces that like doesn't have a gem of a melody in it. And the ratio of great melodies to amount of music is probably higher than anybody else's. Lots of fantastic Tchaikovsky melodies, in also probably just about every piece. Rachmaninoff as well. I'm kind of giving you, going through the Russian composers. Film-wise, I don't know. If I had to just pick one John Williams melody, that's really hard. But I would maybe say Han Solo and the Princess Han Solo and the Princess, right? Their love theme from Empire Strikes Back, or I don't know, or Yoda's theme. I like those two. Lots of really fantastic melodic writing from like Golden Age Hollywood as well. Yeah, I don't know. I can't just give you one melody that inspires me.
I think that was a good bunch, though. A good batch. This next one is from me, and let's see here. Let me copy paste. Basically, it's a long post on r/composer, but the person's basically asking about composition workflow, and they say, is anybody interested in the workflows of composing / creating music, especially interested in using a composer or not? And if it is used, how and what point in the process? Do you think that relying entirely on computer or instrument playback for composition could be an inhibitor to the artistic development of the composer? Do you think there is something to be gained from working without these tools? That's like the general question.
Okay, so the question is generally, should I use just using a computer help and hinder you?
I think they're primarily asking whether computerized playback will somehow hinder your, the fake instruments will hinder your creativity. I
don't know about creativity. What it tends to do, if you don't really have a firm understanding of how real instruments work, is that it gives you a really unrealistic idea of what would happen if real instruments played it. And I see this a lot with student composers or composers who are kind of self-taught. You see this all over the place on the internet, especially. But I've seen it a lot in person as well, working with student composers. The computer is a liar, right? It's sampled sounds, or it's not even sampled sounds. It's like kind of process-created things. So it's not even like backed by any real human playing. It's entirely synthesized. Now, these sounds can do anything that you tell it to do, right? And it doesn't they don't take into account. First off, it's totally synthesized. Of course, it takes into account nothing. And even if it's played by a real human being as a purely sampled sound, it's a sound sampled in complete isolation. So what you get is it will do exactly what you tell it to. But that does not mean that a real human can make that happen, right? If you, for instance, write you've decided you've watched some of our past episodes about writing specifically for the piccolo, right? I talk quite a bit about how to write for the piccolo. And if you want advice on that, check out that episode. If you're just look up mixed media piccolo, right? I think that should probably get you to the episode. So let's say you want to write a solo for your piccolo, right? And you figure out what the range is, and maybe your program will limit you to the actual range of the instrument, or maybe not. Some programs, purely synthesized things, will synthesize sounds that are not within the range of the instrument. So you think you're going to write this nice low solo for the piccolo, like in I think introduction to Queen Amidala cue from the beginning of Phantom Menace. Wonderful piccolo solo, low piccolo solo. Okay. And you think the piccolo is going to be really loud down there because, well, you put forte, and it sounds fine on your computer. Well, if you don't orchestrate around it and understand that the piccolo cannot play loud down there in real life, then you're going to run into some trouble in real life, because suddenly you will not hear your piccolo. So, if you are only relying on what the computer does without any reference or understanding of what happens when real humans play an instrument, there are many things, right? How the instrument responds, certain fingerings that are just tricky that, orchestration manuals can't teach you, right? Things about breathing that, the computer doesn't need to breathe, but human beings need to breathe, especially if you're, it's irrelevant if you're a wind instrument player. So if you're just going to rely on these things, you're going to get an unrealistic portrayal of what would happen if somebody actually, you actually got people to play it. Now, you could argue, as a lot of people argue when they are given this kind of feedback on their piece, I see this online all the time. They'll argue that, well, I don't ever expect it to be, played by real people, so it doesn't matter. Well, yes and no, right? I guess in a concrete, like, immediate sense, it doesn't matter, right? You produce the sounds that you want. But if you are doing something that, like, in theory ought to be played by real people, like, you're not just doing kind of like a, ambient sound design sort of thing, you're writing for real instruments, theoretically, right? It's actually going to sound more natural if you write it in a way that is natural, right? As though real human beings could play it, right? Even if they never will play it, it will only remain on your computer. In my experience and my belief is that if you write in such a way that the real instruments would behave, right? You're taking those things into consideration. The music will come off sounding as though it's something that could be played by humans. It'll have that, like, this feeling of naturalness to it, that some things, are just too perfect, and it's just not really an achievable sound, or therefore a believable sound. And if it's not believable, to me, it's not as, like I said, natural, and therefore not as affecting. So, good to use, these digital sounds, so you can hear and visualize in your kind of, in your head what things are going to sound like, because that's a really hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to learn. But you cannot be, I don't think you can really be overly reliant on it unless you are straying totally out of the realm of real instruments.
Something I want to add to that is from when I dabbled in music for a bit, is that it's also just like way harder to input the notes into the computer than it would be to just play whatever you're trying to play, if you know the instrument. Like, even if you have so I have like a MIDI keyboard where I can, just push buttons on the keyboard and, it goes into the computer. And I've mentioned before how the one I got is not good, and I kind of regret my purchase there. But yeah, even if like for piano, it's not so bad because the MIDI keyboard kind of maps onto it 1-to-1. It's a very okay. It's my MIDI keyboard's bad, so ignoring that, if you got a good MIDI keyboard, it should be a 1-to-1 sort of a situation where it's like you're playing the piano normally. Like, if I wanted to, like, I don't know, make it like a bass guitar sound, and I'm playing on a MIDI keyboard, and it's like, well, if I want to pitch bend or something like that, it's like, that's not really possible. The MIDI keyboards oftentimes come with like a mod wheel, which is like a little, like, almost like a scroll wheel type thing, but way nicer to use, where you can sort of just turn it, and that can modulate certain effects, such as a pitch bend, for example. But imagine trying to play with one hand, and it's such an unnatural feeling, probably, of trying to pitch bend with one hand on the wheel. And if if you need two hands for a instrument that what's the word for that? An instrument that can play more than one tone at a time. There's a word for that. But if you, at least there's a word for that in synthesizers.
Polyphonic, I would say.
Polyphonic, yeah. You have a polyphonic instrument. So you have two hands on the keyboard or whatever. And it's now, how do you use the mod wheel now, right? You either hope that your pinky is close enough to it at the end of the keyboard where you can do that, or you just can't, So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there's something else. Something you said reminded me of something that, and I wanted to say that I forgot. I don't remember what. Something about MIDI. Oh yes. It's also the reason we've talked about this on the show several times. But this is also the reason that a lot of composers use what we call sweeteners, right? So if your score is all virtual instruments, what you want to do, if you have the budget to do it, is to add even a few live instruments, right? You could have a violin section, but also just one real violin player that you've recorded playing the line, and just adding, even one or two or three real instruments mixed in with the virtual instruments makes it just somewhat more natural. It's easier to fool even experienced ears into thinking that it's all real. So that's another, consideration. That's something that the top composers are going for. Proves, I think, to me the worth of having, and understanding real instruments.
Cool. Scott, what does your music workflow look like for your films?
Well, I've used the same composer quite a bit. His name's Seth Neufer. He was actually a relative of somebody that was an actor in one of my very first movies. Has always worked for free until this movie. Said, I have to pay you money. He wouldn't do it anyway for free, but anyway. But my process with him is really interesting because I've never met the guy face to face. We only have an internet relationship. And what I will basically do, and it's similar to what I would do with the visual effects person, was that I would, we would discuss what the score needed to sound like. He would often ask me, well, what kind of music do you want this to resemble? What movie do you want it to sound like? What composer do you want it to sound like? But with this movie, I had specific requests. I didn't want a traditional score. I wanted a soundscape. In fact, it's often hard to tell at times, whether the composer or the sound designer is actually creating the ambient mood music or whatever. But the process was just me saying, well, I would just kind of let him go and say, and then I would just give him notes, essentially. One thing I really don't like, is a pet peeve of mine in independent films especially, is wall-to-wall music. I don't know if you've noticed that on indie films, but it is super annoying, at least to me, because it's almost like the movie can't even breathe. It's just you're constantly being told how to feel by the score, and sometimes silence is golden, plays a part. Sometimes there's no score, right? I think of No Country for Old Men, if you've seen that movie. No score in that movie. It's just all tension. But I don't do that. I'm not that crazy also. I think the composers have a viable space. But yeah, it would just be a note giving, and then he would respond. And we know each other well enough, or he can interpret what I'm telling him, that I don't have to tell him over and over to fix the same thing. Obviously that's based on a relationship of people that you've worked with, right? And that there's a language there, rapport.
Do you feel? Obviously, now that you've established, a relationship with this particular composer, it's maybe not as much of a concern. But if you can think back when you started working with this composer, did you feel kind of, I don't know, a sense of maybe not nervousness, but you're relinquishing control over an important creative aspect of your film when you turned it over to the composer?
Do I ever worry about that? About handing it over?
Yeah. Or do you feel like you're there's a chance that, your vision, right? You're kind of handing your vision to somebody else, and maybe they're not going to get it, or they're going to change what the grand artistic vision that you created for the whole.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess one advantage is that, like, I don't give him the whole movie and he just scores the whole thing and then I get it back. It's more like in pieces, so it's easy to fine tune as you go along. And if there's something that's just not working, I'll tell him that. I'll say this doesn't work. We got to try something different. I'm not sure what, I might not know what it is exactly, but it's not this. Which I know. I know composers or some people working in whatever department, they don't want to hear that. They want you to give them some guidance, obviously. So, but I don't worry about it, especially with this person, because I built up trust with him over the years. But that's definitely true of like somebody who you're working with who's brand new, that you've never worked with before, because there is, like when I did my last short film, I'd never worked with the audio person before, and audio is so critical in a movie. If you're not recording dialogue properly, like we mentioned ADR before, I do not want to go back and ADR an entire movie. No way. If that happens, I'm going to be really upset. And I've had that experience too, where you like get the sound back, because I'm editing my own movie, so I'll put the sound into the computer and line it up with the picture and everything, and realize that it hasn't been recorded right.
Yeah.
And that is incredibly frustrating, because not only do you have to either fix it somehow, but now you've got to tell this person that you did it wrong, or you just don't work with them anymore. And that can be super awkward to kind of break a relationship like that. Usually, there's always a way you can fix it, especially without hurting feelings and stuff. But just to go back to your original question, I think it's just a matter of, if you are working with somebody new, doing it piecemeal is definitely better, because you can guide them as they go. Versus, and I really wish I wasn't like long distance for some of this, because then you can just sit with the composer and they can work it out while you're sitting there, right? And you can say, oh, hey, try that, doesn't really work, try this. I mean, it's much harder to constantly being emailing back and forth. It takes forever. So I would love the opportunity to sit down with the composer or the sound mixer or the sound designer or whatever, and just go through the whole movie that way, or the colorist,
Yeah, there are so many great videos of composers like in the 70s who, of them sitting down at a piano with directors and playing through themes, and that just doesn't happen anymore. Unless you're John Williams, then it does happen. But John Williams is John Williams.
Yeah, like what George Lucas said. He just gives this movie to John Williams, and he comes up with something amazing. That's what he said.
Yeah. Also, to your point about sound, I back in college, I got to do sound recording for Irving, and also for some other short films. It was quite an interesting experience. I learned quite a bit doing that.
Yeah, student short films are fun.
Yeah. It's a learning experience for sure, yeah.
Well, I will say some, without naming names, some sets were much better run than others.
I hope you're talking about my set, Ben.
Yours is the better run one. I will not name the other one. The working conditions for me on that were,
sometimes I think that gets overlooked, like set management, right? I mean, that's what the first AD is supposed to run the set and manage everything. But like, I typically don't have a first AD, because that's one more person I'd have to pay. Yeah. So you have to figure, which, I mean, you're at a disadvantage. As many parts or as many jobs as you cut out, you're at a disadvantage. Same thing with like line producer or somebody that's trying to keep everything organized, whoever's organizing everything. Because as you probably know, trying to keep things running on a set can be chaos if you're not organized. So.
Oh yeah, and then there's interpersonal things that happen sometimes, and people get angry at other people, and then boy.
Yeah, imagine if that would have happened with me, because everybody was living in the same space. So I'm glad it didn't. But
also just unrealistic expectations, like not having a fundamental understanding of like how sound works, and then saying, well, this is an impossible situation, and but you have to do it anyway, and it's yeah.
You still got to get it done. Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, and there's a particular scene where it chose to do this. It's like next to a waterfall and a train track, and and they expected clean audio from that, and it just was not happening. So that was a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh man, I love student films. They're horrible.
I don't think I even got credited on that film, despite my work on it too.
Oh no. Okay.
I'm pretty sure I wasn't credited. But maybe that's for the best, because the end result was not pretty as predicted.
Yeah, I've had that feeling before working on people's stuff, being like, do I want to be credited on this though? Like, is that... I'm not entirely sure.
I've had that feeling too, actually. It's kind of funny.
Kai says, Ben, how many films did you compose overall?
Like film scores have I done? Mm-hmm. I don't know. I've done a few things, smaller things. Yeah, I'd like to do something like with that. I haven't done any film composing recently, so I'd like to get back into doing some of that. Yeah.
Maybe I'll have some work for you after Scott has sufficiently put the fire under my bum and to get.
Where's that feature, Irving? Come on, Ben needs some work.
Well, we talked a couple of weeks ago about some kind of noir thing, right? Like,
that's true.
That's my like I said, I think that's my genre for composing, like noir and like James Bond kind of stuff. That sort of stuff.
Now you've got the mind going. All right.
Very cool. Love noir.
Sweet. Well, that's Arguing with Reddy. You want to transition us over, Ben?
Yeah, well, thank you for listening to Mixed Media Music. A special thank you again to our guest, Scott, for joining us today. And if you are just watching this episode, again, thanks for watching and listening. Make sure you like and subscribe. And you can check out links to our social media pages, our Discord, and our locals page. Pointing in the right direction. I can't see myself. I think I'm pointing in the right direction. mixedmediapodcast.com. And if you are watching live, if you can, make sure you stick around and listen to Nathan. I think he's going to be talking about improving the arcade experience or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Mixed Media Gaming.
All right, welcome to Mixed Media Gaming, the segment of the Mixed Media Podcast where we talk about all things gaming. Today we're talking specifically about arcade games and the arcade experience and how we can improve them. And I don't know if it's coming through the mic. My voice is slowly dying, so please pardon me if that's noticeable. I don't know if it is or not.
It's for thematic expression over the time of your of your segment.
Right. We are a little bit long on this podcast. So luckily, this topic wasn't going to be very long to begin with. So there isn't as much to say about this. I'll explain why, anyways. So yeah, before we continue, let's just reintroduce ourselves for anyone who has just tuned in. So my name is Nathan Nestor. I'm a video game developer and 3D modeler.
And my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania. I've got a company called Ariella.
Hi, my name is Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer.
I'm Scott Eggleston, a filmmaker and YouTuber out of Alaska.
Yeah, so I forgot to mention that. If you're just tuning in, we have a special guest, of course. Scott's not normally with us. As you said, he's a filmmaker, and if you missed that part, go make sure after you watch this part, you go to watch Irving's segments that he did earlier, interviewing him, and all on the films he's done, and specifically Bad Bones, which is what we watched together and looked at. So, yeah, for now, I'll be talking about arcades. So this was prompted by actually Irving was there too. Went to a Dave and Buster arcade.
Forgot about that.
Yeah. which was an interesting experience. And I don't know what I expected going into it. And I'm sure Dave & Buster is not the pinnacle of the arcade experience, right? It's just like a random arcade chain. I don't even know how common that is. I don't even know if people know what that is. But actually, do you guys know what that is? Do you know what Dave & Buster is?
Yeah, we've got one here.
Okay.
Pretty popular. I mean, at least with like younger people. I don't know. I've never been to one.
Aren't you the younger people?
I mean, my sister took like some kids she was babysitting there the other day, so
Yeah, as we'll see, I think it is definitely oriented towards the younger audience, younger than myself even. So,
wait, hold on. So, Yudosai, who is 99 Crime, says in the chat, arcade time, woot woot. I've been to Dave & Buster's many times, went for my 12th birthday.
Yeah. I think I expected too much. That's not to say that, I think we oftentimes underestimate the capacity of children. Like they don't need to be like given literal garbage, Like it's possible to give them high quality stuff and for them to enjoy, and hopefully be raised with a finer palate for things. But I guess not. We have to give people Dave & Buster's instead.
This is absolutely something I think is true in like all of the arts.
Yeah, definitely.
Like this, like look at kids' TV shows.
It's just awful. Well,
unless you're watching Bluey.
Unless you're watching Studio Ghibli, like Japan does children's content way different.
And
Bluey.
Bluey is a fantastic. Like I wish I had watched Bluey when I was a kid.
Well, actually, Scott, what's your opinion on anime? Any anime thoughts?
Anime? Well, that came out of left field. I thought we were talking about arcades. I don't have a lot of experience with anime other than I've seen, some of the classics like Spirited Away or Akira or Ghost in the Shell, those type of movies, but not a lot of them. But I can respect them definitely.
Yeah. If you've ever seen like children's Japanese children's movies or animes, it's just the amount more they trust children to understand deep things is like it's way more, and I think it's actually a lot healthier for maybe with some caveats. Maybe I disagree with certain things, but by and large, like a lot of the themes, children can actually start to tackle them and grow up a little bit. Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I will say as a kid growing up, now that I think of it, I did watch some anime and probably didn't realize it because there was some TV shows that were clearly anime, like Battle of the Planets. I'm familiar with that one, or Voltron. I mean, we're definitely in the era of me growing up. So they were cool.
99 Crimes got a hot take. He said, I actually found some of my favorite arcade games at Dave & Buster's. Confidential Mission is so fun. I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, to be clear, he didn't say you misread. You said it. Oh no, you didn't misread. You did say favorite arcade games. I thought it was singular, but you did say plural. There are multiple. Interesting. Maybe I have not explored the Dave & Buster's enough, but I don't know. Well, I'll get into it. Right, we can talk about it. Right. So, I had quite a few issues with the Dave & Buster's, of course, and. One of the things that struck me upon entering, the first thing, it was kind of just hit with a brick type thing, was the amount of machines that were not really games and were just activities, they were pseudo child gambling. I was very confused. This doesn't seem very fun at all. It was
ticket machines.
Yeah, so there's the crane machine, which is a little bit more. I can understand that more. Okay, I can understand that more. I'm pretty sure it's at least in SpongeBob, it's called the skill crane. So supposedly there is some skill involved in that. And okay, fair enough. But there was that one giant wheel where you just put in your digital coins or whatever into the machine, and then it just spun a wheel and you got tickets based on where it was. And I was like, what? It literally yeah, it's not very interesting. Kakaro says, maybe I haven't not explored Dave & Buster's enough. We're about to learn enough of Nathan versus Dave & Buster's lore for a short horror film.
Trapped in Dave & Buster's.
Man, my worst fear. But But yeah, that was the first thing that kind of struck me. I was like, dang, that's kind of interesting. I didn't really expect that to be the experience, but okay, there was a lot of that, and there's a lot of nonsensical ticket output too. With arcades, is one of the unique features of it is that you put coins in and you get tickets out, and those tickets can be used to get some sort of prize or whatever. Which is a really strange thing when you think about it, because like, let's say like, I don't know, you're working up to win like, I don't know, something generic. Let's say a ball, right? It's like some ball that you can like buy from the prize shop or whatever. Like certainly, like it would be cheaper for you to just like to buy the ball outright if you had like a smaller store, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of funny, but I understand like you get to play the game as well. You get to play games as well, so it's like a fun way. It's like the conversation, right? It's just an added benefit is the prize thing. I just think it's kind of funny.
I think the word you're looking for is scam, right? It's a carnival game. Right?
Yeah. It's like a really big carnival feeling in a way, right? Where it's like when you play those carnival games, you're being played. You're almost certainly gonna lose.
Now, Nathan, if you let's say you decided to become a regular at your local Dave and Buster's, and you mastered these games, right? Are they gonna kick you out, like casino might kick you out for being a card shark?
So I once heard a story. I don't remember who I heard this from. I heard a story about somebody who would go to an arcade where they would give a ticket bonus to someone who got a record on a certain game every day, like daily. Like whoever got the record for that day would get some sort of ticket bonus. I don't remember what game it was, but he would just come in and he'd be the first person to enter every time. So you just set the record immediately and they leave. You guys ticket bonus every single day, and kind of like just show up and get ticket bonus by getting not the world record, sorry, the record on that one place for the day, because it didn't have to be like you have to get the record over the entire day. Rather, you have to have held that spot at least once throughout the day, right? As long as you just show up at the start, you're the first person to play the game, you can get the record and get a ticket to leave. He wasn't kicked out as far as I'm aware, so I don't know. I don't know the Dave Buster's policy or the other arcade policy, but
so you can game the system that way. Just you gotta master all of these games.
Well, the thing is, the prizes there aren't even that interesting. Like Irving was there, and it's like I'm serious when I say there's a ball you can get, right? That's like that is what I got actually. I left with the ball. To be fair, I was there one time, right? So it wasn't like I accumulated tickets over time, which I think is part of the idea, right? I think part of the old I don't know how common this is either, but Fun Time America, is that just like a New Jersey thing, or is that a thing everywhere? You guys know what that is?
No.
Okay. I guess that might just be a local thing actually. Fun Time America is a how would you explain it? It's like a indoor amusement park type thing. It's very small scale, I guess, but it has an arcade in it.
It's like a Chuck E. Cheese blended in with a few flat rides that you might find at a theme park or something, carousel and a few other things that you might find at an outdoor park.
Yeah, Chuck E. Cheese is probably a pretty good way of explaining it, but a little bit probably older on the theming. But yeah, so why did I mention that? Why did I mention America? There was a reason why.
Arcades.
Arcades. There's arcades there. Oh yes, with the tickets there. I remember that. But when I was younger and I went to Fun Time America, you would have the physical coins you'd put into the machines that you had to buy. Or I don't know if they were quarters. There might have been specific coins or quarters. I don't know. There's some physical thing you put into the machine, right? And it gave you back physical tickets. And I always thought for the longest time, like part of the scam of the arcade is that you could lose the tickets very easily. That's kind of the thing, right? If you want to come back later, right? It's like, where did I put the tickets? Like, oh, I'm starting from square one thing again. But with at least with Dave & Buster's, the tickets are digital. They're on a card, and you can put the card in your wallet. It's actually in my wallet.
You're not going to lose the card too.
I guess so. I don't know, but it's on a card, so I don't know. Maybe they're trying to peel back the scam a little bit, but yeah. So you have this whole ticket thing. The prizes it's like one of the things about the arcade is like the uniqueness of the experience, right? Or like the prizes could be very unique, but it's like, oh, you have glass cup themed with Dave & Buster's on it, a ball with Dave & Buster's theme on it. It's like, certainly I could get these for like $2 on eBay, right? These are not like the most like, I don't know, they wouldn't get me excited, right? And of course they do have like the big ticket items, like you have a Nintendo Switch or whatever, which would take probably forever to ever get one. It's probably basically unattainable.
Yeah, they could. Now that you say it, like, I feel like an easy play for them would have been to do cheap products, but that are basically collectibles. That would have been the interesting middle ground where it's like you can't actually buy this anywhere, but it's cheap for them to manufacture.
You could just create something new, right? But the issue is that none of the prizes are really anything new. They're all things you could get elsewhere, right? And technically not quite, because they're all Dave & Buster's themed, but that's not adding to the value at all, okay? That's just, you know, it's like, okay.
I mean, if you're a Dave & Buster's regular, don't you want a Dave & Buster's cup to drink your Coke out of?
Isn't there like a cover charge, too, to get into Dave & Buster's?
Yes, there is.
So you pay for the tickets, the amount of tickets you want, and there might be some sort of thing where it's like the more tickets you get, you know, they give you a bigger deal essentially on the tickets or whatever. But yeah, you pay for tickets to pay into it, and also food you can buy as well as their other.
I'm going to date myself here, but growing up in the 70s and 80s with the video game revolution, I mean, there were arcades everywhere in the 80s. Mm-hmm. There was arcades, those, you know, separate entities that were arcades. There was arcade games in like every grocery store. I mean, it was everywhere, and yeah, it's definitely. I mean, Dave & Buster's is sort of the evolution of that, because arcades sort of lost popularity when, you know, home gaming became more refined. Where just you could get a system at home that far outclassed anything in the arcade, you know, so people just stopped going. I think that's why they died. But it's it was interesting because I've been to Dave & Buster's here locally, and it's weird too, because like back in the day, I'm dating myself, in the 80s, where, you know, they had all the stand-up arcade games that were all, you know, a certain size, and Dave & Buster's has like have you probably seen like the retro games are like humongous, right? The fighting games are like, they have like Galaga, Pac-Man and everything, and they're just enormous. They're like twice as high as they ever were back in the day, but it's kind of interesting. But they're just not, it's not the same anymore, where they were so ubiquitous, you know, just like everywhere you turned you saw video games.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head on the big issue is like you know, now we have like home systems that would outclass anything that you found in an arcade, and kind of the thing with the arcade coming up is like, oh, it's a really accessible way to play games when you don't have home systems, right? Or at least, you know, home systems can be very expensive, and it's like we have, you know, a relatively low entry fee to play some games, and you can play a lot of games, right, while you're there. And the issue is like pivoting from that when that's no longer the case, right? And I thought about, you know, you could, of course, you know, still have some sort of thing where like, okay, well, the arcade can still be a place for cutting edge technology, right? That technology is just more expensive now. But I can see why that'd be an issue, especially as the demographic for arcades is typically younger, and it's like, do I want to trust younger people with like 4K monitors and like, you know, things like this?
Yeah, you're going to get like a beautiful like panel or whatever, but then you're going to have to put like 3 inches of glass that destroys all the quality of the panel like in front of it, you know, just to protect it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could have like full-blown, you know, like PC gaming systems in your arcade cabinets essentially nowadays or something. But I mean, there has actually been something else that's filled that niche, and we don't really have this in the United States, but in other places they have PC cafes, which are essentially cafes where you have gaming computers set up in there, and they're not very common around here. But I think, you know, there's, you know, the United States is large. That there are places that have them, but I've never seen one personally. I just know they exist, but in other countries they are a lot more common. So that's sort of taken the role of what the arcade was trying to do before, right? And so it's like, what now? And I think they still have like, there's still room for them to exist, right? And one thing is like they could still like, one issue we have now is that a lot of retro games are no longer accessible. So I mean, this is kind of notorious with Nintendo specifically, is if anyone tries to distribute older Nintendo games, they'll receive a cease and desist letter, right? Because they'll be like, you know, hey, you cannot, which fair enough, you can piracy not allowed, fair enough, of our older games. But the issue is they don't sell those games anymore, and so it's like we can't even play them anymore, and that's kind of an issue that people have. And it's like these games kind of thematically kind of fit the arcade in a way, right? Because they're retro games, right? It would feel almost at home and almost nostalgic in a way for people who at least grew up in that time, and it could be like a very cool, almost like a obviously not completely genuine, but a sort of portal into the old arcade by having new arcades that just have a lot of these retro games that Nintendo and other companies don't actually distribute anymore, and they say, hey, well, we may not sell them, and the reason why they don't sell them, by the way, is, at least my theory, is that if they still sold the older games, they would be in direct competition with their new games, and because video games, compared to movies, are made relatively quickly, right? So there are a lot more games that a company is producing than say some movie studio might be making in the same amount of time. So you have games competing with themselves, essentially, especially as games are a reconsumable media, where movies are as well, but you'll find a lot more people playing video games like 10 times over than watching a film 10 times over, if that makes sense, right? And so people play games for longer amounts of times than they watch movies, because movie might be, say, 2 hours or 3 hours on the longer end. And a video game, you might be able to play through one full playthrough in like 10 hours or something like that, right? And so they sort of compete with themselves, and so if Nintendo and other companies still sold their older games, they would be in direct competition with their newer games. People would just not buy the newer games, or less people would buy the newer games because they'd be stuck playing their older games, and they would not be able to sell their older games at the same price for crazy reasons I will not explain at the moment, but I probably touched on before. So, but at the arcade, right, it's like a sort of like, hey, we're not competing with our other games because, well, if you want to play at home, you want to play on a modern system, like, well, you still got to play the new stuff, But if you want to go to an arcade, you can play the old stuff now, right? And that would seem to make a lot of sense to me. I'm not sure why that's not something that's being pushed for. One thing that we saw at the arcade was a Mario Kart. Actually, there's Mario Kart, but it was a different version of Mario Kart than like the any sort of Mario Kart version you would see outside the arcade. It was called, I think, Mario Kart GP. 99 Crime can definitely correct me on this because he's the retro gaming guy. So I think it's called Mario Kart GP or something like that. Oh wait,
there's a lot of chats.
Sorry, I missed a lot of chats.
Let me. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, he says I think it's GP or GX. You're right. Yeah. And it just seems like Mario Kart was just worse, which I thought was bizarre, right? It's like the nice thing about being in the arcade is they give you a steering wheel, and the steering wheel was broken, by the way. So I mean, okay, but I was stuck turning right, I think, for large portions of the game. Very strange. But I guess getting chalk that up to like things are going to break, and that's whatever. I can't really fix that. I suppose it could be an unreliable part to begin with. I don't really know. I was there one time. It could have just been bad luck. But they had the opportunity to actually, they gave everyone a steering wheel, right? And it's like, oh, now this is a different experience than something I would have received at home, right? And then they gave you a watered-down version of Mario Kart. Not that Mario Kart is a very complicated game, by the way. It's not something that needs to be watered down for people to understand how to play. But for some reason, it was just a far simpler version, which I thought was very strange. So this is like not the type of exclusivity we want, right? We want exclusivity of games that are still good, by the way, But like, imagine playing Street Fighter again in the arcade, right? Street Fighter was originally in the arcade, and you could still play like the older Street Fighters in the arcade. I don't see an issue with that, right? It would be cost effective in terms of the arcade cabinets, and it would be thematically nice in a way, right? And sort of giving the retro vibe. And it's still actually a good game, right? People actually like Street Fighter, so it'd be something that people would play in the arcade. Now I'm gonna catch up on all these chats because I don't want it to like run rampant. So we have 99 Crime. I won a basketball last time I went. Really? Okay. Never heard of Funtime America. Arcade devs really fell off after like 2000, sadly. Only a few big studios still release new arcade games. That's exactly what they do. Actually, Linus Tech Tips recently took apart a modern Sega cabinet, and it was just a 2010 era PC with some extra stuff thrown in. Kikara says, "Are you saying Super Mario Bros. 3 arcade machine when?" Hey, why not? 99 Crime says, a lot of NES games actually got arcade releases, especially early on. Check out the Nintendo VS system for more info on that. Mario Kart GX is great. It was made by Nintendo, Namco, and Sega. Jeez. Okay.
What?
I think it's GP or GX, you're right. The game is very differently balanced than the other games. I don't know. I think the issue I had with it was like, it just seemed like, well, I am biased because steering wheel didn't work, so I guess I suppose I didn't have the full experience. But from memory, it seemed like it seemed a lot more mindless in a way that like it felt almost trivially easy, as in like it's very easy to just follow the course and then just press the item button whenever you got to use the item, and it wasn't really it wasn't very challenging. I guess it was the issue, right? It was very simple. Is the issue I had with it. So yeah, if you brought back these older games, I think that'd be a really cool idea. And I'm sure there are probably some arcades around that do something like that, and I'd be interested in checking out one of them. So I don't mean to like I don't mean to talk about all arcades in this, right? Surely there are many arcades that are nice. And in other countries, such as I was watching a video recently on Japan and their arcades, things are very different there. And I don't quite understand it, to be honest. The video, I was like, I thought it'd be very simple. And then I was like, I don't quite understand how these differences arose. But the things are a bit more different. But yeah, in terms of game choice, like older games and something that they need to not do is Scott mentioned like things like Galaga or Pac-Man, right, on these like big screens, and I remember seeing at the Dave & Buster's just a big Pac-Man game and thinking, why is that there? Because you can play Pac-Man on any device made basically any time recently, like in the past couple decades. I think.
You can probably play it on a graphic calculator these days.
Well, I would imagine they're aiming that at the parents bringing the kids.
I think so. And it's like, I don't know if I commend like the uniqueness of big screen, I guess, but I don't know if Pac-Man was the thing. No hate to Pac-Man. I do enjoy Pac-Man, as much as the next guy. Pac-Man is fun, but I don't know if that screen real estate should have been used for a game that most people find kind of non-interesting, not because it's a bad game, because it's just it can be played anywhere, anytime. It's like it's not that interesting. It's not what do you call it? It's not what's the word for this? You know what I'm saying? It's not unique and special in any way. So yeah, it's not a novelty. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not a novelty.
So my question though is like, I feel like if you're gonna put games in a physical space for everybody to enjoy, I feel like there's a few category of things that make this most sense. One, where like the interfacing with the game is unique in some way, like just how you play the game is not just mouse and keyboard. It's something more interesting that you can't just put in your home. And two would be something that like people like to watch together, like, you know what I mean, like where like having a big display or like big interface makes it more entertaining, not for the people just for the people playing, but for people around them.
One thing that would be kind of interesting would be, I was thinking, it was like tournaments, right? Like the nice thing about being in a physical space is that you're in a physical space and everyone's there, right? And that affords two good things with tournaments. One, there is a native viewership audience, right? Because people are just going to be there. So there's that. And the second thing is there's no lag when you're all in the same spot, right? Which is an issue if you're having a intercontinental sort of video game tournament or something like that. How do you have somebody from Asia, not have much lag if they're playing on a U.S. server or something like that? That's a bit of an issue. So you have regional tournaments and things like that. But especially for more niche games and stuff, it would be nice to just have a spot where you can just go to, right? Not saying that people from Asia should just like come to an arcade in the United States to play at a tournament. I'm saying that the tournament would probably be popular because it's local anyways, more popular. So, yeah. Let's check my notes. So yeah, I think an interesting thought about arcades is like, I've heard the concept that a lot of arcades are rigged to make you fail, and almost in the carnival sense of almost in the sense of a carnival, right? Where it's like, in a carnival, they don't want to give you the prize. At least not, they don't want to give everyone the prize. They would just lose out a lot of money if they just give everyone a prize, right? So they make the games kind of hard so that only a small percentage of people actually win the prize, and they should make a net gain profit. And I've heard the concept that with like arcade games, they're sort of rigged to fail so that you put more coins in. The same sort of concept, right? It's like they're very hard and they don't get much ticket payout because they want to keep playing and keep playing and keep playing. And I thought that was kind of interesting because that's kind of antithetical to modern games as like modern as in like not like past retro era, but as in like very very recent games that have been pushing to be longer and longer. And I heard the term "forever game" used today. I thought it was interesting from a video I watched, sort of like a Skyrim where it's like the game never ends. You're playing forever. Type thing, endless content. And it's very opposite actually to a arcade. And even though they seem like I should say it seems antithetical, but I don't think they're actually opposed to each other. Because if you consider something like, say, Valorant or CS:GO or something, where the reason why they want you to play forever is because they can essentially get you to pay via microtransactions down the line. It's kind of the same thing, where it's kind of like you're taking, for lack of a better, it's not better terms. Sorry, it's not for lack of better terms. It's just funny. You're taking chip damage to your wallet, right? It's like you're taking it's like over time, it's like, hey, give a coin now, give a coin now, give a coin now. It's the same sort of situation, right? Where it's like with an arcade game, the method of getting you to pay a little bit over time is different. It's making you lose, essentially. You're making you have to play again. Whereas with something like Valorant, it's like, it doesn't matter whether you lose or win the round. It just matters how long you're playing, how many rounds you play. And then eventually you'll hopefully fork up some money, and that's and that'll be good. But I think the thing is the arcade version kind of manifests itself in a more sinister way, in that like now the game is being affected. At least with Valorant, the game is not affected. Like the balance of the game isn't affected by that. But with an arcade game, it's like, oh, this game is just needlessly hard or something, just because they want coins or something.
Well, I know in some of those old arcade games that I grew up with, like they could adjust the difficulty, or like how many points you need for an extra life or whatever, so that you would either, be forced to pour in more quarters, or obviously, except for this really skilled players, the jerks that would spend 30 minutes on this, one quarter,
Uh-huh. Yeah, those are the people that the arcades hate, But yeah, so yeah, those are some brief general thoughts on the arcade and how I think they're doing things in a very strange way. It doesn't make more sense. I suppose it makes a bit more sense if you're going from the perspective of like, hey, we don't really value games that much. We're just trying to get kids in to put some coins in some machines and try to get a ball at the end of the day, or something like that. But from a more tasteful video game sense of you want to cultivate a culture that values video games for what they're good at, and not just sort of mindless playing and pseudo gambling type things, and nice sounds and cool lights and whatever. That they're not very conducive towards that environment. So yeah, let's keep it short this time, as I said before. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, there are a few chats. So 99 Crime says West PM. I don't know what that means.
I don't
either. Kai says Forever Game is a sort of a horrifying idea. Yeah. 99 Crime says Weststone's. Oh, maybe that's what he meant to type before. I'm not sure.
West One's Wonder?
Oh, West One's Wonder Boy. Is Monsterland kind of... Okay, I'm failing to read this. You read it.
West One's Wonder Boy in Monsterland kind of didn't do that well because it let the players do way too much in the game without spending more money. I see. Yeah. I mean, I wonder what the solution to that would be, though, of how do we make the same amount of revenue? Or, you don't have to make the same amount of revenue, but at least not go out of business without intentionally ramping up difficulties in order to get people to put coins in. And then 99 Crypts says it was Smash Hit on consoles. Yeah. I guess that's a tough problem. Well, although with the suggestions I said, I would hope that it would attract more people to the arcade. So it would, in some way, in some, you'd be doing better, hopefully. But I can imagine that would be still a big hit to the profits. So it's certainly a tough challenge. No, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying like if I was given an arcade today, I would be so good at managing it. I would be the best arcade ever. I'm not saying that at all, because it sounds like a difficult task to be quite clear. But just some thoughts, if it happens. So, yeah.
Sweet. Well, I'll throw a free idea out there for anyone who does own an arcade. Have you heard of the Big Screen Beyond, Nathan?
I have not.
It's a new VR headset, basically, and it's like really tiny. It's like basically instead of having a big honking thing on your face, it's like a very tiny thing. One of the cool things about it, as you were talking, I thought about is like, one of the problems about VR places. Well, there are many problems because I've seen in malls around like VR, like I don't know what you call them, like. You could just go pick up a headset in like a large room and you could play games or whatever, and you pay a membership or something like that in order to do that. It's kind of like a VR arcade basically. But one of the big problems is like that equipment is just not conducive. Like big, massive displays on people's faces that need to mold to your face and be comfortable, and like they get sweaty and disgusting, and like it's just not a good experience. But something small, 99 Crime says he's heard of it. Cool. Something small is a bit different, and I think they have like molded face plates. So one thing that you could do is you pay your membership and you get your molded face plates for you, right? And then you go into the VR experience and maybe you only have sit-down games or something like this, so it doesn't take up like, I don't know, like a whole room's worth of space just to play a game. Wouldn't be very efficient for the business. But if you have a bunch of sit-down games, you have your sort of personally fit faceplate, you attach it to your little thing, and then you do your thing. That might be one way to like overcome VR issues. So there's a free idea if anybody wants to do that. You probably have to make them a little bit more indestructible because they don't look that strong. But otherwise, it should work.
That does remind me of something I thought of, but I forgot to say. Is like you did touch upon it before. Actually, is that like a unique way of interfacing with games is something that an arcade is useful for, right? Because like for example, if you're playing like DDR or something where you have a dance pad, right? You're probably not gonna put a dance pad in your home, right? And maybe I'm sure there's some people who have dance pads in their home, but it's not the norm. So a place where you can go that has a dance pad or VR headset in this case, or some sort of although VR is definitely tricky because of the space thing and very expensive technology once again, where it's like, do you want to trust people with like obviously they would pay some sort of fine if they broke it, but there's the whole thing, the whole trouble, right, of having people with expensive equipment they don't own using in your work. But with like dance pads and other things like that, or like that we played this axe throwing game, like where you had like this like fake axe and you threw it at this like fake board thing, but the axe kind of stuck to the board, and it was a little bit janky in terms of like it looked weird, like in terms of like the wood board didn't really look like a wood board. I don't know how to explain it, but you have to kind of see it to understand. But like in terms of like that's just something I can't do at home, right? I can't just like throw an axe at a wall, right? Things like that are like that's like I think that game was like probably the most creative in interface, right? Where it's like, wow, this is not even a video game really at all. Actually, this is like a physical like experience right here. I'm not interfacing with some digital realm. Well, technically I am because the score stuff is all digital. But the core game was not digital, right? I'm throwing a physical axe at a board, and that's pretty cool. Love to see a lot more of that kind of stuff.
Sweet. Well, actually, yeah. Before we wrap up the show, what's your favorite video game, Scott?
As in an arcade game?
I'm on the spot.
Any game.
I'm gonna go with Atari Tempest, from favorite arcade game of all time.
Ooh.
You ever played that?
I've not played it, but I do know Tempest is a very well known arcade game.
That's a good one. Yeah, I was terrible at it, but I loved it. I enjoyed arcades as a kid, but I was never like super skilled, so I'd burn through quarters pretty quick. But I played all the classics. I mean, I wasn't really into maze games as much, but Asteroids. I mean, and actually to this day, I have like a little pocket emulator, like a clamshell emulator. Play Atari games on that all the time. Old Atari 2600 games.
That's cool.
Cool. Yeah, Noptop. Noptop says, "I'm late to the party. What did I miss? The whole show. What the heck?"
Noptop, another DIY filmmaking YouTuber.
Oh, okay. Well, welcome to the channel. You can go back to the beginning of this episode, like 3 hours ago, to see the interview of Scott. But thank you for.
By the way, something that. Sorry to cut you off. Something I don't know if a lot of people know this, but like on our YouTube channel, you might notice if you look at it, like you just go to our YouTube channel, it says like you haven't posted in a very long time. You have to click the live tab to see the old live videos, which is kind of annoying. So we have videos, they just don't show up on the home page.
Yeah, it's one of the weirdest like design choices from YouTube is not allowing you to choose which tab shows first. Because we're a live show now, so we don't post videos anymore. So it looks like we're a dead channel, unfortunately. But we're not. We're alive.
It's really weird. Like, why would it even need to be under a separate category?
It didn't used to be that way. It
wasn't like that before.
Now it's that way for whatever reason. I can't do anything about it.
Well, Google is being sued right now, right? You said that?
Yes.
It's over.
They're going to liberate us. Liberate us from our tab issues, yes. Noptop says, I will catch the replay. Well, thank you very much. All right, Nathan, you want to take us out of the show?
All right, yeah, we've come to the end. But yeah, thank you for watching. If you missed anything, of course, you can go check out our podcast, our VOD of the podcast, and go back and see anything you missed. Once again, special thanks to Scott for sticking around with us, especially for all 3 segments when, he's a film guy, but he's still stuck around for music and video games, which is super cool.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
thanks for joining us.
Thanks for being on, yeah.
Mm-hmm. If you want to catch us on our future episodes, you can go to mixedmediapodcast.com. You'll find a link to all our social medias and whatever, anywhere you can find us. And from there, you can subscribe, follow, or whatever it is on whatever platform. If you want to continue the conversation afterwards, the best way is to go find our Discord, which you can also find by going to mixedmediapodcast.com. And from there, you can it's the easiest way to contact us, and we can have a
highly
super chill
discussion.
discussion.
Discord. It's a fun time.
Yep, and some final chats that were before we end. Kekara says, I think it's just assumed like a lot of Minecraft YouTubers will have their programmed content but might also want live stream archives. So it might be assumed most creators are similar. Feel free not to read this. Oh, I read it. Thanks, Scott. Spiritual dude. Yeah, okay. So, it's a bad assumption in my opinion, but because we could solve this issue by just re-uploading the entire thing as a video. It's just kind of dumb, in my opinion, but I don't know.
It's really stupid.
So, yeah, all right. Did I miss anything? Is that all? That's all, right?
That's all.
And special thanks again to our local supporters.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks to our local supporters.
Yes.
99
Crime, Rob Sharma, Alex Egbert, KK Ross, and Post. If you want to support us as well, you can get some cool perks, such as drawing on that live whiteboard that Irving drew on earlier. You can go to, once again, mixedmediapodcast.com. You'll find a link to our locals where you can support us for $5 a month if you so choose. So, yeah. Thank you for watching.
Yeah, thanks for watching and listening.
See you next week.
Bye.
Look, tell a man no trouble. I don't want beef, man. I just want vibes. Big man like me, no need for the telephone hype. I got too much getting online. One rule, then I'm on site. Wrong move, I bet they gon' ride. No need for the telephone hype, nah. No need for the snoozing. Big whip outside, I'm cruising. Big stick inside, no losing. Better watch out for the snake and Judas. Don't ask them who this is. I bet they know what I'm moving in. I bet I show it into a dim. How you hate and then lose again? How you hating my vibes? Why you wasting my time? Getting hype on my line. Tell a man I don't want feedback, I just want relax. Brand new whip, two-tone, I need that brand new hit. You know, like lean back, brand new bits I live in. We pack, man, you never gon' like us. Get them on sight now, let them on light. That way they know I'm alright.
Forget how long
Look
it
at my
goes.
life, I'm living alright. I'm nice, you know I'm alright.
It just feels kind of long when
No
it's
need for the
silent.
hype or fight or telephone vibe.